What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in X-Men as Omega-level Mutant? Part 2. If you enjoy this type of content, please brutally slash the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Remember to check out the original story linked in the description. Let's get into the without further ado. Aaron's first-person POV, 1 month later. It's been 1 month since I moved out of the Mutant Academy to my new home. I did some renovation to make it at least habitable. Nothing too fancy, just enough to call it a home. Moving on, I found a normal job at a delivery firm. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough for a single person to get by. Well, not that I need money since my investments bring me more than I could ever spend in my whole life. I got around 40 million in my bank account thanks to the rise in Stark Industries stocks and the fall in Oscorp stocks. Not to mention those small plots of land I bought using the remaining money I got from casino earnings, which were later sold to real estate agencies for a ridiculous amount. All in all, I'm more than rich, I'm freaking loaded. Anyway, I decided to keep my mutant power a secret from everyone outside. The mutant detectors don't work on me, so I'm safe for now. Oh, if you are wondering why I'm still living in that small house or why the hell I work in a small delivery firm, the reason is simple. No one cares about a simple delivery guy and I drive a lot around town delivering orders. So, I get to see and hear a lot of things. This also helps me keep track of what's going on in the city, which comes in handy when I need to punish someone who escaped the law. All the news I gather during work hours, I use them to help out the regular civilians who the heroes always ignore. The corrupt cops, thugs, muggers, thieves, etc., etc. I punish them all in secret. It's like that TV series Dexter Morgan. He kills criminals who have escaped justice and his alter ego, the Bay Harbor Butcher. That's basically what I do too, minus the killing part, well, as long as I can avoid it. I only beat up criminals and send them to prison or sometimes, straight to the hospital. And I also set a mental trigger in their mind. The moment they think of doing anything illegal or crime again, they will get insane nightmares and hallucinations for a few days, and even after that if they again try to commit a crime, the final trigger will activate, killing them on the spot. Now, no one can say I didn't give them a chance. 3 chances should be enough, right? But the hardest part of this life is to hide from the heroes. There are cameras everywhere. So, I take my time and plan everything before moving. Last week, that Punisher guy almost got caught by the cops. I was there in the area, and I might have helped him escape. Hopefully, he will be in hiding for a few weeks. That way, the heat will die down. I'm not a vigilante or a hero. I'm just a delivery guy who delivers packages in the morning and justice at night. I guess this is what they call keeping the city safe. Right now, I'm driving my car with some fast food and drinks for dinner. That black G-Wagon before me belongs to a mafia group. Hammerhead, or so I heard. I've been following them for the past week and found some disturbing stuff. They were involved in all kinds of shady operations, extortion, drug trafficking, arms deals. But what really got under my skin was the human trafficking racket they seemed to have their hands in. I'd pieced together the structure of his crew. Hammerhead ran things with an iron fist, but the day-to-day operations were handled by his lieutenants. Benny was one of them, but there were others, guys like Frankie Fingers and Vitoed Scarface. They were ruthless, but none of them were as dangerous as Hammerhead himself. The guy was a freak of nature, with a surgically reinforced skull that made him nearly invincible. I'll rip out his skull if I ever get my hands on him. It's about time someone put them down for good. I kept my distance, careful not to draw any attention. My car, an old beat-up sedan, blended easily into the late-night traffic. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed, "Follow me." Hammerhead's crew was paranoid, always on the lookout for tails, so I had to be extra cautious. Hammerhead wasn't just running the usual mafia operations. He had found a new partner, someone or something much more dangerous. The name Simkarian kept popping up in the chatter I'd overheard, an organization based in a small war-torn country, known for its elite mercenaries. The more I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just about the usual criminal empire building. Hammerhead was planning something big, something that could shift the balance of power in the city. Earlier today, I overheard a conversation between 2 of his goons. They were discussing a shipment, high-tech weapons, arriving from overseas in a few days. The kind of weapons that would give a small-time gangster like Hammerhead the firepower to take on anyone, even the bigger crime families or superheroes. The deal was supposed to go down at the docks, where Hammerhead's crew controlled a few warehouses. That's where I would make my move. But I needed to be smart about it. Taking down a mafia crew armed to the teeth wasn't something I could rush. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I reached for it with one hand, glancing at the screen. It was a message from one of my informants, an old bartender at a dive I frequented when I was gathering intel. I manipulated his mind and turned him into my informer. He had a lead for me on Hammerhead's right-hand man, a thug named Benny the Bull Caruso. The message read, "Benny's at Club Mirage. Hammerhead's not there, but he's talking to some big players. Thought you'd want to know." Club Mirage. A seedy nightclub where lowlifes and wannabe gangsters hung out. It wasn't far from where I was, so I decided to make a detour. The G-Wagon had pulled into a gated compound up ahead anyway. Hammerhead's men were always holed up in one of their safe houses around here, so I'd catch up with them later. I took a left turn, heading toward the nightclub district. When I finally reached Club Mirage, I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. The neon lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. A couple of bouncers stood by the entrance, checking IDs, but I had no intention of going in through the front. Instead, I made my way down a side alley, where I knew there was a back entrance. I phased through the wall. The thumping bass of the music reverberated through the walls as I moved through the dimly lit corridors. I found him in one of the VIP lounges, seated on a plush couch, surrounded by a couple of goons and a few women who looked like they didn't want to be there. But what really caught my attention was the man sitting across from him. He was dressed in a sharp suit, with an air of authority that screamed danger. I couldn't place him at first, but then I remembered. This was Alexander Kravenov, the younger brother of Sergei Kravenov, better known as Kraven the Hunter. What the hell was he doing here? I went to the bar. "What'll it be?" asked the bartender. He was a burly guy, with tattoos on his arms and a scarred face. He looked like someone who could handle himself in a fight. "Whiskey neat," I replied. The bartender poured me a drink. I sipped my drink. "You sure about this, Benny?" Alexander asked, his accent thick but his tone controlled. "Yeah, I'm sure," Benny replied, taking a swig of his drink. "The shipment's coming in 3 days. High-grade stuff, straight from Symkaria. Once we get our hands on it, no one in this city will be able to touch us. Not Fisk, not the cops, not even those freaking superheroes." Alexander leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Symkaria doesn't like failure. If your boss screws this up, it'll be more than just your heads on the line." Benny chuckled, but there was a nervous edge to it. "Don't worry. Hammerhead's got it all under control. We'll handle the transport, and your guys will get their cut. Everyone wins." Alexander didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood up, adjusting his suit. "I hope for your sake you're right, Benny. Because if this operation goes south, I won't be the one dealing with the consequences. You will." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Benny looking a little more pale than when the conversation started. As Alexander Kravenov strode out of the VIP lounge, leaving Benny, the Bull Caruso, visibly shaken, I could feel the tension in the room shift. Benny's bravado had cracked, and now he was left alone with his thoughts, or so he thought. What he didn't know was that I had already planted the seed, a mental trigger that would allow me to read his thoughts with ease. As Benny composed himself, I peeked into his mind, sifting through the murky layers of anxiety, greed, and fear. Well, considering his weak mindset, it was easy to find the info I was looking for. The location of their bases, the times of their deals, the names of the key players, everything laid bare before me. Hammerhead's entire operation was now mapped out in my mind, and more importantly, the exact details of the high-grade weapons shipment coming in 3 days. But what would happen if Benny were to die right here, after a drink with Kravenov? What kind of effect would that have on Hammerhead? With his temper and all these witnesses here who saw him drink with Kravenov, they would think that Kravenov poisoned Benny or killed him through unknown means. Well, it won't matter anyway. Hammerhead would shift his focus on Kravenov and start a war between the two gangs. Well, sacrifices are necessary to do some good. I would have given Benny a chance to live, but the shits he has done were enough for me to judge him. So, I'm doing the world a favor by getting rid of such scum. I shifted my focus to Benny and snuffed the oxygen around his face, little by little. As Benny's breathing started to slow, he didn't notice anything at first. His sluggish brain, dulled by alcohol, couldn't process the subtle tightening in his chest. He took another sip of his drink, oblivious to the fact that his lungs were now gasping for oxygen that wasn't there. The women around him were too distracted, and the goons were caught up in their own conversations. No one noticed as Benny's face slowly turned red, then purple. I kept my distance, standing by the bar, sipping my whiskey. From here, I could see everything, but no one could see me. Benny's mind began to panic, his thoughts turning to desperate survival instincts. "What's happening?" his internal voice screamed. But before he could react, I amplified the suffocation, cutting off the last bit of oxygen. He slumped forward, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the ground. The room grew quiet as his body twitched violently. One of his men leaned forward, confused. "Boss? You okay?" His words were hesitant, but when Benny didn't respond, the panic set in. "Benny!" the goon shouted, grabbing his shoulder and shaking him. The women screamed, jumping back as the situation became clear. I walked toward the exit after wiping out their memories of seeing me here, phasing through the wall once more, making sure I wasn't seen. Now it's time to take down those bastards from earlier. Oh, if you are wondering about the CCTVs, well, do you think they would have cameras in a place where a deal like that is going on? I phased back through the alley walls, stepping out into the night, the chaos from Benny's death still echoing inside Club Mirage. The street outside was as quiet as before. I made my way back to my car and slipped inside. The G-Wagon had pulled into that gated compound earlier, one of Hammerhead's safe houses. It was only a few blocks away, and no one would ever know what's going to happen there in a few hours. I pulled up a short distance away, parking the old sedan in a shadowed spot between a couple of cars parked on the sideways. It was a rough neighborhood, the kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions, especially not about a beat-up car that had been parked for too long. Hammerhead's safe house was a fortress, or so they thought. Thick walls, barred windows, and armed men patrolling the perimeter. I could see them through the fence. 3 goons stationed outside, smoking and chatting like they didn't have a care in the world. The gate was reinforced with some high-end tech, but it wouldn't matter. I didn't need to go through the front door. I approached slowly, blending into the night. My psychic powers kicked in, scanning the guards' minds. They were relaxed, thinking about their next break, completely unaware of the danger. I planted subtle suggestions into their minds, and one by one, they began to feel an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. Their eyelids grew heavy, and within minutes, they slumped to the ground, unconscious. I phased through the outer wall and into the compound. It was dark, but I didn't need light to navigate. My mind mapped the layout of the building based on what I had pulled from Benny's thoughts earlier. There were more guards inside, probably a dozen scattered throughout the house. No one important was here tonight, just Hammerhead's grunts, running the day-to-day operations. But that didn't mean they weren't dangerous. I moved silently, slipping through walls and doorways until I reached the first set of guards inside. They were seated around a table, playing cards. One of them had a gun resting on the table in front of him. I focused my powers on the group, casting an illusion that made the room seem darker and colder. Obviously, everything they were seeing was in their mind. Their conversation faltered as they started to feel the chill creeping in. Then, one by one, they began to see things. Shadows moving in the corners, whispers in their ears. Then came the grotesque demon. Panic set in. One of them grabbed the gun, but before he could do anything, I locked their minds down with a single thought. Sleep and enjoy the nightmares. They collapsed like puppets whose strings had been cut, falling onto the floor in a heap. I moved past them, stepping deeper into the safe house. I made my way to the garage on the other end. The G-Wagon was parked there, and that's where I found what I was looking for, a stash of weapons, neatly packed in crates. I opened one of the crates, inspecting its contents. High-tech firearms, some of them military grade, the kind that shouldn't have been in the hands of street-level criminals. Well, this was one of their daily jobs. Selling weapons. My eyes fell on the crates stacked near the wall. These ones were different. I opened one of them and wow. Cash. So much money. But why would they put these in a garage? Must be planning to shift by midnight or something. I heard footsteps. Well, let's not waste any more time and put them to sleep. I expanded my psychic power through the mansion and put the rest of the men to sleep. Oh, there seemed to be 2 girls among them. Anyway, now, time to destroy them. Wait. Why destroy? I heard a new commissioner came to New York. Yuri Watanabe. Might as well give this to her as a gift. After all, she is the only honest cop here in New York. Maybe keep some for myself. Explosive traps outside my house seem fun, in case someone uninvited shows up. I took all the weapons from the mansion and loaded them into the G-Wagon. My telekinesis made it almost too easy, the guns and crates floating through the air like they weighed nothing. Once the weapons were secured, I turned my attention to the cash. A small fortune, stacked neatly in crates by the wall. I floated the crates over to my old sedan, careful not to make a sound. The trunk barely closed, packed tight with all that money. A nice bonus for me, but I wasn't doing this for the cash. Not really. With everything loaded, I made my way back inside. The guards were still unconscious, their minds tangled in the nightmares I'd planted earlier. Just for good measure, I set up my signature triple-layer mental trigger in each of their heads. 2 chances to turn their life around. On the third, death. I packed the car with as many goons as I could fit, then walked outside, phasing through the wall. Time to put this plan into motion. With a thought, I woke one of them up and put an order to drive to the NYPD in his head. With a groan, the man climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. He seemed confused, but he didn't question it. The trigger was strong, overriding any doubts or fears. He was under my control. As the G-Wagon pulled away from the compound, I started my car and followed at a distance, keeping just enough distance to stay out of sight. It wasn't hard. The streets were almost empty. And even if we did run into another car, the trigger would take care of any problems. The goon drove like an automated vehicle, his mind blank, focused on one task. After reaching the NYPD, the goon got out with his gun. I made him fire a couple of shots into the air, causing panic among the officers. Then I made him throw his weapon and surrender and planted a final order. Tell them the truth and every illegal thing you guys have done. Perfect. After that, I made my way toward that orphanage that May Parker runs. Might as well do another good deed, right? The next morning, I sat in a little diner close to the orphanage, drinking a cup of coffee. It was just another morning, and the smell of bacon and eggs cooking filled the place. I looked out the window. People rushed to work, children with backpacks went to school, and sometimes someone walked a dog. It was calm and peaceful. I had secretly left the money at May Parker's orphanage late at night and just left without saying anything. I didn't want anyone to know it was me, and I didn't need them to. The kids would never find out who gave the money, but it didn't matter. That money would help them have a better life, giving them a chance to survive in a city that can be very tough. But I wrote a note and placed it on the bundle. Considering her character, without a note, she would have definitely taken it to the cops. And the traps are in place. The bell above the diner door jingled, pulling me out of my thoughts. A waitress in her early 50s, with a kind smile and tired eyes, came over to refill my coffee. "You need anything else, hon?" "Nah, I'm good," I replied, offering her a polite smile. She nodded and walked back behind the counter. I glanced at the TV mounted in the corner of the diner, where the morning news was playing. I saw the headline flash across the screen. Weapons cache and major crime bust at NYPD. Mysterious tip leads to gang's capture. I leaned back in my chair, watching the news as the reporter explained the events from last night. Apparently, the police had raided Hammerhead's safe house after a man drove straight to the precinct, surrendered, and spilled everything about their operations. The NYPD had recovered a cache of military-grade weapons, along with several gang members who were now in custody. It was being hailed as one of the biggest busts of the year. Then another headline caught my attention. New Commissioner Yuri Watanabe makes bold moves, promises to clean up the city. The camera cuts to Yuri standing at a podium outside the precinct, giving a press conference. She looked sharp as usual, her voice steady as she thanked the public for their cooperation and vowed to bring more criminals to justice. I smirked into my coffee. I hadn't given her a gift so much as I had delivered a message. Hammerhead's organization was in disarray, and with Benny out of the picture, the tension between Hammerhead and Kravinoff was bound to escalate. It was the perfect storm, and Yuri would be right there in the center of it, cleaning up the mess while I worked from the shadows. There was still work to be done. Hammerhead wasn't going down without a fight, and Kravenov was no small-time thug. But I had time. For now, I'd let the city think it was on the path to salvation, while I quietly dismantled the rest of the criminal underworld piece by piece. Oh yeah. The life of a vigilante seems to be fun for now. After I left the diner, the crisp morning air greeted me as I made my way to the old sedan parked around the corner. The city streets were already bustling, and the sounds of honking cars, chatter, and distant sirens formed the symphony of New York. I blended into the rhythm, just another face in the crowd. I slipped into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of leather and cheap coffee filling the air. The sedan's engine sputtered to life, and I pulled out into traffic, heading toward the warehouse where I picked up my deliveries. It wasn't far, maybe a 20-minute drive through the Bronx. I couldn't shake the thought of Yuri Watanabe from the news earlier. She seemed like a tough one, driven and righteous. Maybe too righteous. The kind that wouldn't just let things slide. It was good to have someone like her in the city's ranks, though. She'd clean up the surface while I handled the underbelly. As I pulled up to the warehouse, my mind switched gears. Time to focus on the task at hand. The place was a nondescript brick building, nestled between a scrapyard and a hardware store. Nothing about it screamed legitimate business, but that was part of the charm. I parked the car and headed inside, the creaky door protesting as I pushed it open. Inside, the familiar faces of the other delivery drivers greeted me with nods and casual greetings. Most of them were just trying to get through the day, same as me, except they didn't have a secret life. Or at least, not one like mine. "Morning, Nick," said a gruff voice from behind the counter. Roy, the warehouse manager, handed me my clipboard without looking up from his computer. "You got the usual route today. Couple stops in Brooklyn, one in Manhattan. Keep it tight, traffic's gonna be a bitch today." "Why? Rally or something?" I asked. "Something like that. There's this big charity gala at the plaza tonight, and it looks like all the fancy folks are in town for it. That'll mean more people and more cars clogging up the streets. Why don't you put on that fake suit you bought last week and go there? I'll tag along. Maybe we can have free food," I teased him. "Har har," he deadpanned, rolling his eyes. "Just get your butt out there and make your deliveries, alright? We've got a reputation to uphold." "Ha. Told ya, that site was a fake," shouted a man in the corner of the warehouse, probably one of the new drivers. I snorted, shaking my head. "You'll fit right in." Roy let out an exasperated sigh. "Shit. I should have listened to him. My wife is on my butt for wasting that much money on a fake suit. Happens to the best of us," I said as I walked over to the other side of the warehouse, where a row of vans was lined up, each one loaded with a different delivery. After loading up the sedan with the packages, carefully stacking them just right, I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, checking my list. Nothing unusual, mostly office supplies, a few packages for small businesses, and the occasional shady-looking box that I didn't ask questions about. The day moved quickly as I made stop after stop, driving through the chaotic traffic of Brooklyn, crossing bridges, and dodging the usual gridlock that made deliveries in New York feel like running an obstacle course. Most of the recipients barely looked at me, just signed the papers, and went back to whatever they were doing. By the time I reached Manhattan, it was close to noon. The sun was high in the sky, and the energy of the city had shifted. People in suits rushing to lunch, tourists snapping photos, and street vendors selling everything from hot dogs to knockoff handbags. My last stop for the morning was a small tech startup in a sleek glass building downtown. I parked the car a few blocks away and grabbed the last box, making my way to the office. The lobby was buzzing with activity, people rushing between meetings, heads down, talking into phones. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the 7th floor, leaning against the cool metal wall as it ascended. The elevator dinged, snapping me back to the present. The door slid open, and I stepped out into the open-plan office. A receptionist with a bright smile greeted me as I handed over the box. "Delivery for you," I said, keeping my voice casual. She nodded and signed for it, not paying me much mind. Just another delivery guy. Perfect. As I made my way back to the car, my eyes fell on the alley opposite the building. 3 college students were beating up a homeless man. They laughed as they kicked him, taunting him like he was some kind of animal. The sight sent a wave of rage through me, my blood boiling. I was about to rush there and beat the shit out of them personally. I mean, all these people passing by did nothing. They just walked by lowering their head. I took a deep breath, calming myself down. Decisions made in anger usually end poorly. It doesn't matter how fast or strong you are, if you make rash decisions based on emotions instead of logic, you'll get yourself killed. I used my psychic power to stop them from hitting that old guy and read their mind. I need to know the reason behind that situation. It turns out, those 3 bastards lost their wallet yesterday around this part, and now blaming that guy, calling him a thief. The fun fact is that the homeless guy wasn't even in that alley yesterday or the day before yesterday. Well, it's time for judgment. I made them fight each other. They kept punching and kicking until they were rolling down on the main road, stopping the cars. Yeah, keep hitting each other. That's right. Don't stop. People started taking pictures and recording them. Soon the cops would be here, and they would go to jail. One of the nearby patrol officers arrived at the scene, and I manipulated those 3 to punch the cop. And that was the final trigger. The cop used the taser on them. They started to scream and passed out, twitching on the road. The cop called for backup, and soon, the 3 idiots were being hauled off to jail. I smirked, feeling satisfied. It's time to blend in again. Ha! A message popped up on my phone screen. It was from Kitty. Oh, this is new. Are you free tonight? I was thinking, maybe we could go out. You know. Jean said it's alright, and I thought about it for a while. Well, 1 month to be exact. Was that too long? Arg. I'm babbling again, ain't I? Anyway, let me know what you think. Oh shit. She wants to go out on a date. I mean, I always wanted to ask her out after Jean gave the green light, but she wanted to take some time. Well, it's about time, I guess. But tonight? I got my hands full with Hammerhead and Kravinoff. I couldn't skip them just because of a date. I had plans to raid another base. But I think I can take out a few hours. I texted back. I'll pick you up at 8 p.m. The day passed like any other. I made more deliveries, took shortcuts due to traffic, and kept my eyes out for trouble. The city seemed calmer than usual. By the time the afternoon rolled around, I was more than ready to call it a day. So, after reporting back to work, I clocked out and headed home to get ready for my date. I took a quick shower and dressed up. A simple blue shirt, jacket, and black jeans. Nothing too flashy, just enough to look presentable. After a quick look in the mirror and a mental check to make sure I wasn't looking like a complete fool, I grabbed my keys. Alright, time to go. I locked the door and went to the little garage. Wait. It's our first date, and I can't possibly take her out in that beat-up car of mine, can I? It didn't take long to find a rental service. I rented a good car. The car wasn't too fancy or too cheap, and most importantly, it looked good. It's an Audi A6. I took a test drive around the block, checking to make sure everything was in working order. Everything seemed fine, so I drove it to the Mutant school. I was 10 minutes early when I reached there. Phew. I took a few deep breaths as I parked the car and got out. I had been nervous before, but this felt different. Multiple relationships with Jean and Kitty where they are considerate of each other's feelings. Well, I'm a lucky guy. Kitty soon came out, and she was wearing a simple black dress with her hair tied in a bun. She looked good as usual. Oh, she put on some makeup, I see. I couldn't take my eyes off of her as she made her way towards me. Hi, she said with a smile. Hi, I replied with a smile. You look beautiful. Thanks. You're not so bad yourself, she said, her cheeks blushing slightly. So where are we going? Truth be told, it was sudden and I didn't get enough time to plan things. I told her the truth. But how about a long drive and dinner, maybe a drive-in movie after? If you're interested, of course. Sounds good, she replied, nodding. And it's nice that you're spontaneous. It's exciting. Oh, I'm full of surprises, I chuckled as I opened the car's door for her. She smiled at me and got in. I closed the door and walked over to the driver's side, and as I was about to get in, I saw Jubilee, Rogue, and Jean peeking their heads out of the door like 3 conspirators. They even gave me a thumbs up. I shook my head and got in. As I settled into the driver's seat, I caught Kitty glancing over at me with a grin. Something funny? I asked, starting the engine. She laughed softly, shaking her head. It's just... I saw Jean and the others spying on us. I chuckled. Yeah, they're not very subtle, are they? Kitty rolled her eyes playfully. Nope. But it's sweet. They've been teasing me about this for weeks. I shot her a sideways glance as I pulled out onto the road. You? Nervous? I wouldn't have guessed. She shrugged, looking out the window with a slight smile. I don't get nervous about many things, but this, I guess it's different. Different how? Kitty turned back to me, her expression softening. We've known each other for a while, right? But this, us, it feels like uncharted territory. I wanted to make sure I was ready before. Well, before we did this. I nodded, appreciating her honesty. I get it. It's a big deal. But we'll take it one step at a time. No pressure. Her smile widened. I appreciate that. The tension between us eased, and the atmosphere in the car felt lighter. We continued driving through the city. So, I said after a moment, glancing at her. You into drive-in movies, or did I just luck out with that suggestion? She laughed, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. I love them. Jean used to rent a car, and we would often sneak out without permission. It was fun. Plus, you get to sit in a cozy car instead of those cramped theater seats. Good to know. I think I've got the perfect spot in mind. So, how's work? She asked casually, leaning back in her seat. Busy with deliveries? You know how it is. The city never sleeps, and neither do the packages. It's been a little busy lately, but nothing I can't handle, I replied. Yeah, it's been a little too busy lately. Gotta put in some more effort. If not for these damn surveillance cameras and shits all over the city, my job would have been much easier. I need to find a mutant with techno ability or something similar. That way, I should be able to disable nearby cameras and all. Anyway, let's focus on the date. Kitty nodded, her smile widening slightly. Anything exciting happened lately? Exciting? Well, yeah. I just fueled a war in the mafia world. In a couple of days, I'm gonna start a war. End a couple of gangs together. That's kinda exciting, right? I chuckled, keeping my voice light. Exciting? Not unless you count getting stuck in traffic for an hour or almost getting sideswiped by a cab. Or arguing with a customer about whether or not their package was insured. I swear, some people are just... I stopped abruptly, realizing what I was saying. Sorry. I guess I just needed to vent a little. I shouldn't be complaining about my job on our first date. It's all right, she laughed, shaking her head. Sounds like the glamorous life of a delivery guy. Yeah, I really live on the edge, I teased, grateful that the conversation stayed focused on my day job. Mostly it's just packages and paperwork. But every now and then, you run into something weird, like that guy who signed for a package wearing a bathrobe and snorkel mask. Kitty burst out laughing. You're kidding. No. 100% serious. I guess everyone's got their quirks. We continued chatting and joking. After a relaxing drive through the city, we ended up passing by a cozy little diner. I was ready to pull in and suggest dinner. Actually, she said, I was thinking, how about we grab some burgers and fries and eat them at the drive-in? You know, something simple and fun. I agreed, loving the idea. That sounds perfect. We pulled into the diner's parking lot, and I quickly ordered a couple of cheeseburgers, fries, MT do for her, and a Coke for me. While we waited, we leaned against the hood of the car, chatting about random things. Movies we liked, her favorite ice cream, and all those nice things, you know, getting to know more about each other. It felt so natural, so comfortable. After we picked up our order, I paid and we made our way toward the drive-in movie. It was a bit far, but it was okay. Drive-in movie. I found a good parking spot, and as soon as I turned off the engine, Kitty reached for the takeout bag. This is way better than a fancy restaurant, she said, pulling out the fries. Burger, fries, drinks, movies, and you. It's the best. We should do this more often then, I said as I unwrapped my burger. Yeah, we should. Next time, maybe with Jean. You know, 3 of us together, Kitty said with a shy smile. Sounds like a plan. I replied. We munched on our burgers, laughing at the cheesy one-liners from the action flick on the screen and trading fries like it was the most natural thing in the world. There was something about the simplicity of it all. The food, the movie, and just being there together made it feel like the perfect first date. No pretenses, no awkwardness, just us. After a while, Kitty leaned back, her eyes on the screen but her attention clearly elsewhere. You know, this is nice. I was worried it would feel weird, going from friends to this. But it doesn't. I glanced over at her, taking in how the glow of the movie flickered across her face. Same here, I admitted. But honestly, I'm glad we're doing this. It feels right. She smiled at that, a soft, content smile. Yeah, it does. We stayed like that for the rest of the movie, enjoying the movie, the food, and each other's company. By the time the credits started rolling, the night air had cooled, and the city beyond the drive-in was calm and quiet. I couldn't help but feel like the night had gone better than I could have hoped for. I mean, my first date with Jean got interrupted over and over again, but thankfully, tonight was good. Really good. Ready to head back? I asked, stretching my arms and glancing over at Kitty. She nodded, but there was a warm glow in her eyes. Yeah, but I had a really good time tonight. I smiled, starting the car. Me too. Let's do this again sometime. Definitely, she replied, settling back in her seat as we pulled out of the lot and headed back toward the school. As we drove through the city, the silence between us wasn't awkward or heavy. It was peaceful, filled with the quiet understanding that this night, this first date, was just the beginning of something more. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I didn't need to rush. We had time, and I was okay with taking things slow. After dropping Kitty off at the school, I drove straight to my house. Tonight I'm going to destroy another of Hammerhead's bases, or more like expose, and get the cops involved as always. So I changed back into my night work clothes, all back, and a hoodie jacket. Then I took the mask from the drawer and went to the garage. I locked the rented car in the garage and took my old sedan out. I made my way to Hammerhead's next safe house. It was another one of his minor operations, a place where he kept his more questionable assets and ran side deals. Normally, I could dismantle it with ease, slip in, use mind control, and leave without so much as a scratch on me. But lately, things have gotten boring. Where's the excitement in pressing a button, so to speak? I wanted more than that. I wanted the challenge. So tonight, I'm gonna try something different and give myself a handicap. Only use ice and phasing power as long as possible. I parked a few blocks away, taking care to avoid any surveillance cameras as I approached the warehouse. Around the corner of an alley, I stopped and scanned the area. The building was big and there were a few cars parked outside around the gate. Then there were a couple of men walking around the place, trying to act like regular civilians, but they couldn't fool me. Those tattoos on their arms are a dead giveaway. All right, time to move. Sticking to the shadows, I phased through the sidewall, slipping inside without a sound. The cool air of the warehouse hit me, along with the dim glow of overhead lights that flickered every now and then. Dang. Why the hell is it so cold here? On the far end of the place, there was a giant freezer. A couple of thugs were going in and out, carrying boxes. A freezer of that size. Are they perhaps keeping organs or something like that? Or dead bodies? Whatever it is, it can't be good. A couple of goons stood guard near the main door, but they were more interested in their phones than watching for intruders. Amateurs. I moved past them easily, staying out of sight. I decided to check the upstairs and get a perfect idea of what I was dealing with here. I avoided the cameras and guards. This part was easy, just phasing through walls or objects whenever I needed to dodge something. But as I rounded a corner, I heard something that made me stop in my tracks. Voices. Angry, low, and filled with menace. I moved closer, staying in the shadows. There, in the middle of the room, I saw two of Hammerhead's men. They were standing near a woman tied to a chair, her face bruised and bloodied. Yet, she wasn't broken, and neither did she look like she was in pain. The goons were laughing, taunting her as they took turns throwing punches. Is this your best? I guess you guys take steroids to buff up. Your power doesn't match your body, she said after spitting a mouthful of blood. One of the goons punched her again, this time in the stomach, making her cough and spit out blood. Shut up, bitch. The chair fell back with her. She groaned in pain, struggling against the ropes that kept her bound. The other one with a bald head kicked her stomach and spat on her face. Yeah, shut up, bitch. We're gonna take our sweet time torturing you, and then when you are broken, we are gonna enjoy the hell out of your body. Ah. Those retards. She was aiming for that. That chair was old, so that fall with her sitting on it broke the chair and made it easier for her to break free from the ropes. And she did. As soon as the Baldy bent down to pick her up, the girl grabbed his head and smashed it on the ground. Then she easily broke the chair legs, flipping up like an acrobat on her feet, and hit the other one with the sharp end of the chair leg. He howled in pain as the broken chair leg hit his eye. She took advantage of that opening and rushed in. A hard kick on his left knee broke it with a crunch. Gah! She ran around and jumped on his back, choking his throat with a strong grip. What's that about your sweet time now? The bald guy was about to get up and rush at her, but she saw him and hit the guy she was holding on his head with her elbow. Blood sprayed out of his nose and eyes. Dang! Just how hard did she hit him? He fell down, unconscious. With the first guy unconscious, she turned to the Baldy. You should have called your boss here and could have saved yourself, she said while cracking her fingers before picking up a knife from the unconscious man's belt. She moved towards him with a murderous glint in her eyes. Arg. Bitch. The Baldy rushed to his right. There was a table on his right, and on it was a gun. However, the girl was faster. She rushed in and slammed the knife on the Baldy's feet, then delivered an uppercut to his chin. The Baldy fell on his back, but before he could get up, she grabbed him by the collar and punched him again. Now I'm gonna enjoy torturing you. I was dumbfounded. That girl beat up that Baldy to a pulp. Blood was all over the floor around him. Finally, she stood up with a sigh and walked to the table. She picked up the gun and sat on the table. Now, where is this weapon deal taking place, and when? I'll give you 3 chances, she said, pointing the gun at him. Damn you. Bitch. You think you can get out of here? With all that commotion, the guards will be here soon. The Baldy coughed out blood. His face was beaten so much that he couldn't even open his eyes. Bang. She shot the Baldy on his butt. Wrong answer. Arag. The Baldy screamed in pain. You crazy bitch. 2 more chances. If I don't get the answers I need, I'll start shooting your family jewels one by one. So try to answer me, or else you're going to become a eunuch, she said with a smirk. She was clearly enjoying the situation, and I couldn't help but read her mind. Natasha Romanoff. The Black Widow. No wonder she took them down so easily. From what I can read from her recent memories, she was tracking down some kind of alien technology that Hydra dug out of somewhere on Fury's order. Now, Hammerhead stole that shipment when the Hydra was transporting it. And here she was, tracking Hammerhead's footprints. Her mission was to track down the shipment at any cost before Hydra could track it. I could hear footsteps coming up. From what I could sense, there were around 20 of them. This is bad. No matter how good she was, there was no way she could fight all of them alone with just that handgun, not to mention she was kinda beaten up. But then again, she got a genetically enhanced body. Or that glass window. Of course, she's gonna jump out. There was a dumpster just below that window. Who the heck are you? The Baldy tried to buy more time. She didn't answer and instead fired another shot at him, this time on his left leg. The Baldy screamed in pain. Wrong answer. Natasha smirked as she shot twice at the glass window, shattering it. Final chance. Wait. I could sense someone standing right below her on the ground floor, and he got a freaking RPG launcher. Shit. He pulled the trigger. I really didn't want to use this power. I haven't mastered it properly. TSK. But, oh well. I used super speed to get down, grabbed Natasha and took her up in my arms, then ran out of the building. Boom. An explosion rocked the second floor, followed by multiple more explosions. The entire warehouse was exploding. The shock waves and heat waves threw us back on the ground as I raised an ice dome around us. Burning goons running out of the warehouse yelling, "Aha! Hail Hydra! Aha ha ha ha!" Then those guys who were patrolling outside began to rush into the fire yelling the same thing, "Hail Hydra!" Hydra's suicide bombers. 5 more cars are approaching our location from one end of the road, while cops are coming from the opposite side. I removed the ice barrier and my ears were ringing. You want to deal with them or come with me? I asked her as she stood up with a groan. She was looking at the police and the Hydra agents when the explosions and fire stopped. How did you? Never mind. Thanks for saving me. Now get out of here. Natasha looked at me, her gaze hard and stern. Bronx. 32 Avenue, 8th floor. That's where they are keeping the tech. I told her what I found out from that Baldy's mind. Those Hydra freaks began to shoot, and so were the cops. You owe me one. Well, two actually. I quickly picked her up in my arms and ran out of that area with super speed. I couldn't let her get caught up in that mess. After getting out of the danger, I let her down. As I was about to run away. Stop. Who are you? Natasha caught hold of my arm. I'll tell you next time we meet. Till then, try not to die. I yanked my hand away and ran away. Today is Sunday, so no work today. I sat on the couch, sipping coffee and flipping through the news. The usual talking heads yammered on about economic collapse, politics, and celebrity drama until something more interesting caught my attention. Explosion in the Bronx. Authorities are investigating what they're calling a coordinated attack on a suspected criminal organization's safe house. Eyewitnesses reported a massive fire, followed by a series of explosions that rocked the entire block. The NYPD has not yet made any arrests, though unconfirmed sources suggest the involvement of the notorious mafia boss, Hammerhead. Meanwhile, sources indicate possible ties to Hydra, the international terrorist organization. I smirked. Nice to see the cops finally doing some work. But that bullshit about no arrests wasn't surprising. Yuri must have captured some of the Hydra agents during the shootout and investigated the situation from behind the scenes. Still, I gotta pay her a visit and check out for myself if she's using the opportunities wisely. If she's doing things well, then it's all good, but if not... Anyway, I wonder if Natasha recovered the tech from Hammerhead's base in the Bronx. Considering her skills, it is not that hard. She'll handle this just fine, no doubt about that. I hope she's more careful this time. After finishing my coffee, I was about to take the cup to the basin, but that is when I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone today. I tried to use my super speed to check out, but it didn't activate. I quickly tried to use my psychic ability to look who it was, but it failed. My mutation isn't working. What the hell is happening? Power nullifiers. Someone came after me, I see. If I'm not wrong, they have this place surrounded, and considering it's far away from the city, they had it easy. Plus, I'm pretty sure they aren't friendly or else they wouldn't have gone that far. I could hear footsteps surrounding my house. The doorbell rang again. Now isn't the time to panic. I've been prepared for a situation like this. After activating the microphones and the hidden cameras, I grabbed the untraceable phone and earpods that the beast gave me when I left the academy and quickly went to the basement. There was a little tunnel that led out to the other side of the lake behind my house. It was an underground escape tunnel that I built for escape situations. And the house is rigged with explosives. Not to mention those explosives I've planted around the area. I took the trigger and went into the tunnel, locking it from behind. As I crawled through the narrow escape tunnel, the cold earth pressing against me, I held the trigger tightly in my hand. It's just a normal switch, nothing else. Just a single push on it and the entire house would explode. Now, my question is, who are they? Are they related to the cloning? Or perhaps, they belong to some kind of shitty government group? Wait, was the government behind my cloning? Whatever it is, I've left a burner phone in my room. I'm sure someone will call using that and they will definitely try to threaten or act smart. The tunnel stretched beneath the ground for about 200 meters approximate. I could already see the faint light of the end ahead. When I reached the exit, I stopped for a second, listening. Silence. Good. No one was here, yet. I tried to use my power and create a tiny shard of ice on my fingertop, and it worked. Just to be sure, I used my psychic power to scan the area. All clear. I carefully lifted the hatch and slipped out, crouching behind a thick tree. From this vantage point, I had a clear view of the house. They were closing in, surrounding the building with military precision. A group of black-suited operatives with what looked like high-tech guns surrounded the area. Definitely not local thugs. There were 3 military trucks with weird machines on the back. Those must be the mutation nullifiers that were blocking my mutations. Suddenly, I noticed one figure standing apart from the rest. He wore a long black coat, his hair streaked with gray. He was barking orders into a comm. William Stryker. Everyone knows that bastard. He's pretty famous in the news. Last month he got his own team of operatives who worked to capture rogue mutants and superhumans. I clenched my fists. As far as I remember from the comics and movies, this guy was infamous in the mutant world, leading countless operations to capture or exterminate mutants under the guise of national security. Stryker didn't just hunt mutants. He experimented on them, controlled them, and twisted them to his purposes. He had something to do with my cloning, didn't he? I put on my earpods. Let's see what that bastard is barking. Stryker paced in front of the trucks. I want a clean sweep, he ordered through the comm device. Find him. Our spies didn't see him leave his house, which means he may be within its walls, in which case we have him. Go. He looked at his watch, his jaw tightening. His men were searching inside the house, and some of them were looking around. He was serious. This was a full-scale takedown. Soon, one of his men came out of the house with the burner phone. Nice. Now let's talk, shall we? Just as I expected, Stryker dialed the only saved number and raised the phone to his ear. My phone began to vibrate. I used my super speed to run away from that area, but made sure to stay within the range and then took the call. I took a deep breath and pressed the answer button, keeping my voice calm and measured. Hello. I said casually as if it were any other day. Where are you? Stryker's voice was harsh, demanding, with an edge of impatience. I smiled to myself. Ah, Stryker. I was wondering when we'd finally get the chance to talk. Been a fan of your work, you know? Especially the part where you capture and torture mutants. Real classy stuff. There was a brief pause, and I could hear the tension in his silence. You think this is a game, he growled. You're trapped. No powers. Nowhere to run. Even if you run, we'll find you. But if you cooperate, maybe I'll consider leaving you in one piece. I'm not really a cooperate kind of guy, Stryker. But tell you what, how about you cooperate with me? See, the thing is, I've got my finger on a little switch. A switch that will turn my house and the entire area into a lovely crater. You think you and your little operatives in there are going to survive when I blow this place sky high? I chuckled darkly. The silence on the other end was deafening. I imagined him weighing his options, calculating the odds. You're bluffing, he said finally, though there was a note of uncertainty creeping into his voice. Am I? I glanced at the trigger in my hand. I'd hate to ruin your fun day, but I'm willing to bet you don't want to find out. You've already lost the element of surprise. Maybe you should call your little hunting party off before things get messy. But then again, when will I ever get a chance to remove the enemy of the mutants in the entire world again? Wait. Stryker stuttered. Nope. I pressed the trigger. The world seemed to freeze for a moment as I pressed the trigger, and then all hell broke loose. A massive explosion erupted from my house, followed by a series of smaller, rapid explosions. Flames shot into the air, accompanied by thick black smoke, engulfing the entire property. Stryker's voice vanished from the other end of the call, replaced by static. I ran back to see the scene. There ain't no way I'm gonna waste this view. Through the chaos, I could see Stryker's operatives scattering like ants, diving for cover as debris rained down. The high-tech trucks were caught in the blast, flipping over like toys as the shockwave rippled through the forest. The sound of metal tearing and glass shattering filled the air. I smirked. Who's bluffing now? Stryker's men were burning as the flames and explosions consumed them. I was standing at a safe distance, still watching the fun. But what surprised me was Stryker. He lost half of his body, and that bastard was regenerating at a quick pace. Of course, Logan's DNA or Victor's DNA. Interesting. The fun has just begun. It's time to stop my delivery job and change my current profession to something more fun and bloody. I can't live a normal life anyway. The peace was fun as long as it lasted. Now, time to kill some government agents and expose them. Stryker's regeneration was faster than I expected, but it didn't matter. I had already planned for this. Watching him pull himself together, his missing flesh and bone reforming like a lizard growing back its tail, I knew this fight wasn't over. But that wasn't the point. Not today. The world would know soon enough. I slipped further into the shadows, carefully retreating from the scene. The detonations had done their job. Stryker's unit was in disarray, the trucks were destroyed, and most of his operatives were either dead or badly injured. But I knew the real threat wasn't the men with the guns or even Stryker himself. It was the lie that was coming. Safe house. The television screen flickered, and I watched from a safe house miles away, monitoring the news feed from several major stations. I bought it using a fake identity and ID, and maybe manipulated a couple of people's minds to keep this place safe. Just as I predicted, Stryker's power wasn't just in his physical abilities or his soldiers. It was in his reach, his influence. The news anchors were already spinning the story. Breaking news from the Bronx, where authorities are reporting a massive explosion in what they're calling a terrorist attack. Early reports indicate that a group of armed extremists, possibly mutants, were involved in a firefight with federal agents. The explosion, which destroyed several buildings in the area, was reportedly triggered by these extremists to avoid capture. The identities of those involved are still being investigated, but sources close to the investigation believe that a man known as Aaron, a suspected mutant fugitive, was among those killed in the blast. Officials are withholding further details until next of kin can be notified. A photo of me flashed on the screen. They had already declared me dead, yet dared to frame me. Clever. Well played. If that's how they want it, so be it. I'm game. Now, the main problem is Jean. I just hope she doesn't do anything stupid and lose control of her power. I wanted to contact her to let her know that I'm alright, but there is a possibility that Stryker got spies at the school. I can't risk alerting them. I mean, if there are spies with telepathy immunity like me, then the professor or Jean won't be able to detect them, right? Or they might be keeping a close eye on the school from outside, and contacting them might alert them. It's best not to get her or anyone at the school involved in this until I get rid of the threat completely. Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, third-person POV. In the quiet halls of the Xavier Institute, students and teachers alike had gathered in the lounge area, eyes glued to the television. The news of the explosion was playing out, and the grim headline declaring Aaron's death scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Jean Grey stood at the center of the room, her brow furrowed as she watched the broadcast. Beside her, Kitty, Jubilee, and Rogue wore the same grim expressions. Psylocke, Storm, the professor, and the others were sitting on couches, watching the same screen with heavy-weighted stares. Professor X sat forward in his wheelchair and tapped his temples, his brow furrowing deeper at the broadcast. Just as I feared, he mumbled, they have begun to move. He isn't dead, right? Kitty stuttered in shock. Jean didn't respond immediately. She could feel the surge of emotions around her, the shock and sadness rippling through the group. But something nagged at her, a feeling deep in the back of her mind, like a thread she couldn't quite grasp. She knew that Aaron wasn't dead. Her man was strong enough to defeat 3 Omega-level mutants in an instant. There was no way he would die this easily. But how dare they call him a terrorist, she growled in her thoughts, feeling her anger bubbling forth. Don't jump to conclusions, Logan growled, crossing his arms over his chest. I've seen enough people die to know when something doesn't smell right. Stryker's involved. Makes me think it's all one big lie. Beast, ever the logical one, adjusted his glasses. Stryker has a history of manipulating events to fit his narrative. The fact that this explosion conveniently eliminates a known mutant fugitive fits his modus operandi perfectly. Jean nodded, though her eyes were distant, lost in thought. Then she remembered that Aaron had absorbed her Phoenix Force. So, if she used her Phoenix Force to try to sense the other portion of the Force that was within him, then maybe. Her body began to glow with a faint red hue. A massive wave of energy swept over the room as the temperature began to rise. Jean. The professor's voice, warning and concerned at the same time, sounded out. I can't sense him, she finally said, her voice soft but steady. It's as if he's vanished. She stopped her Phoenix energy from flowing. She almost lost control for a moment, due to her unstable emotions. Logan grunted. Doesn't mean he's dead. The kid's slippery. I'll bet my claws he's still out there, hiding somewhere. Scott's frown deepened, but he didn't argue. Even if he is, Stryker's not going to stop. He'll go after him with everything he got. Storm stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Then we will save our friend with everything we have. Agreed, Beast nodded. Stryker went too far this time. If we just sit this one out, next time, he might target one of us. That's not the worst part, the professor said with a grim expression. Eric won't let this chance go. We have to find Aaron before Eric contacts him, and as you all know, he has his way with words. After a brief pause, Xavier turned toward Beast. Hank, contact Fury. He needs to know about this situation. Tell him to stop Stryker or we'll step in and do what's necessary. Aaron must not fall into Eric's hands. Of course. Beast nodded before walking out of the room, pulling a phone from his coat. Logan let out a low grunt and looked up toward Jean. Listen, Gene. I know you are worried and want to find him, but don't do anything stupid. We'll find him. Stryker's residence, late night, third-person POV. The mansion was quiet. Stryker was sleeping in his room instead of hunting Aaron, not because he wanted to sleep. It's just that every time he uses his regeneration power it drains his stamina and exhausts him beyond anything. The serum he took was not perfect. His men are still working to perfect it. So, he needs at least 12 hours rest. The reason he turned himself into a mutant was because he believed that he had to survive long enough to carry out God's will and remove the imperfect beings from this world to bring forth the balance. And when his job is done, he'll kill himself. Aaron moved through the shadows effortlessly, silent as the night itself. The security systems, though state-of-the-art, were no match for his abilities. Manipulating the guards had been child's play, and avoiding the cameras was a child's play to him. With his super speed, he ran avoiding every camera, trap, and everyone. He read the guard's mind and found out that Stryker's bedroom was on the second floor, hidden away behind thick walls and heavy doors. Aaron reached it with ease, phasing through the wall. There, Stryker lay asleep, his chest rising and falling with each steady breath. It was almost peaceful, almost. Aaron's gaze hardened as he watched the man who had tried to frame him, to paint him as a terrorist. Stryker, who had manipulated the world's view of mutants for so long, thought himself untouchable. Tonight, that illusion would shatter. Aaron made a sharp blade with his ice power. He approached the bed without a sound, standing over Stryker for a moment, watching the man's unknowing face. A flicker of anger crossed Aaron's eyes before he moved swiftly. The blade sliced through the air, meeting flesh with barely a whisper. One clean cut, then another, and Stryker's arms were severed from his body, his legs next. Blood sprayed across the sheets, but Aaron moved back calmly, watching as the pain hit Stryker like a truck. Stryker's eyes shot open, a scream tearing from his throat as the agony registered. His body convulsed, instinctively trying to flail, but his limbs were gone. He glanced down, horror filling his wide, bloodshot eyes as he saw the stumps where his arms and legs had once been. Aaron stood in the corner of the room, his expression unreadable as Stryker writhed in pain. Aaron. Stryker managed through gritted teeth, his voice ragged with shock and agony. You bastard. The man's mutation kicked in, his body already beginning to heal, the stumps where his arms and legs had been slowly regenerating. Flesh knitted itself back together, and bones regrew. The regeneration was fast, too fast for normal wounds, but Aaron had expected that. It didn't matter. He stepped forward, his voice cold and cutting. Yo, does it hurt? Well, it's just the beginning. I'm gonna take away your sleep from you starting today. Every time you try to sleep, I'm gonna slice your limbs and legs. When you eat, I'll poison your food including water. When you go to take a bath, I'll be there all right. I'll stab you 100 times with ice spikes. When you are out on the road traveling, I'm gonna blow up your car. You hide 1,000 feet deep, I'll find you and cut you in half. I'll make every single second of your life a living hell, so let's start now. Aaron used his ice blade to slice off Stryker's regenerating limbs again. Blood sprayed out like a fountain, dyeing the room red and making the walls and ceiling look like some gruesome crime scene. His eyes were cold and calm. Huh. Stryker rubbed his eyes with his regrown arms and looked around. There was no one in the room. Not even the traces of his own blood. He sat up huffing and drenched in his sweat. A dream. He looked at the clock. It was 6 in the morning. He quickly took out his gun from the bedside table drawer and looked around the room. Nothing. Everything looked clean. Phew. He sighed in relief, dismissing everything as a dream. It felt so real. Stryker rubbed his eyes, still shaken by the dream. His heart raced, and his skin was drenched in cold sweat. He grabbed his phone and called security. Everything okay? He asked, his voice rough. Yes, sir. All clear, the guard replied. Good, Stryker muttered, though it didn't calm him. The dream felt too real. He could still feel the pain, still hear Aaron's cold, mocking voice, and see the blood splattered everywhere. His limbs had been cut off, only to grow back, making him relive the agony over and over. He shook off the memory. For now, it was over. Later that night, Stryker had increased his mansion's security, more cameras, and motion sensors in key spots. He tried to sleep, but exhaustion from his body regenerating pulled him into a restless slumber. Just as he closed his eyes, it began again. A sharp, icy blade sliced through his flesh. Stryker woke up with a scream. His arms and legs were gone, cleanly severed again. His bed was soaked with blood. Aaron stood at the foot of it, his ice blade dripping red. No, this isn't real. Stryker gasped, terrified. His wide, bloodshot eyes stared at the stumps where his limbs had been. Aaron smiled coldly, not saying a word, watching as Stryker's limbs regrew in horrifying speed. As soon as they healed, Aaron moved again. Slice. Stryker screamed louder this time, his voice raw. You still think it's a dream? Aaron whispered, his voice icy. I told you, I'll make your life a living hell. 3 days later, the nightmare continued every night. Every time Stryker closed his eyes, Aaron appeared, cutting him apart like he was nothing. The pain was unbearable, the blood endless, the fear consuming him. His body healed, but his mind didn't. He stopped eating. Sleep was impossible. Even during the day, the line between reality and nightmare blurred. His once safe mansion felt like a cage. Every corner seemed to hide Aaron. Every sound, every flicker of light was a threat. But it wasn't just at night anymore. The shower incident. Stryker stood in the bathroom, steam rising from the hot water. He stood under the shower head, trying to clear his mind. But as he rubbed his eyes, he felt a sharp sting. When he looked down, he saw it, a thin shard of ice sticking out of his chest. His heart nearly stopped. Ice? In a hot shower? Before he could react, another shard pierced his leg, then another through his shoulder. He screamed, but the water drowned it out. He stumbled, the pain sharp and real. But then he blinked, and the ice was gone. The wounds disappeared, the blood gone. He collapsed onto the bathroom floor, breathing hard. Was it real? Or just his mind? The dining hall later, he forced himself to eat, his body weak from lack of food. Sitting alone in the large dining hall, Stryker barely tasted the soup as he ate. But halfway through, his stomach turned violently. He gagged, his throat burning as the taste of blood filled his mouth. Poisoned. His eyes darted around the room, searching for Aaron. But no one was there. He blinked, and suddenly he was fine. No pain, no blood, no poison. He wasn't sure if it had been real, but now he couldn't eat again. Exploding SUV 3 days later, Stryker had a meeting in the city. He didn't trust his mansion's safety anymore, so he left in his armored SUV, packed with guards and extra security. As they drove, Stryker's paranoia grew. He felt Aaron's presence, even in the SUV. His hand stayed glued to his gun, never letting go. At a stoplight, the guards glanced at him, sensing his unease. Then, the explosion hit. Fire erupted from underneath the vehicle, flipping it into the air. Metal twisted and tore as flames engulfed the car. Stryker's body slammed into the ceiling, bones breaking. The pain was unbearable, fire and smoke clouding his vision. Then, blackness. He woke up, gasping, back in his room. His SUV was fine, parked outside. His guards were alive and safe. The explosion had never happened. He looked at his body and saw that he was wearing his suit for the meeting, yet he didn't even realize when he fell asleep. But Stryker's heart wouldn't stop racing. He could still feel the fire on his skin. The elevator. The final straw came in his underground base. Stryker took the elevator down to the research labs. As it descended, he leaned against the wall, trying to stop his hands from shaking. Halfway down, the lights flickered. The elevator groaned, then jerked violently. The cables snapped. Stryker's heart jumped as the elevator plummeted. Weightlessness hit him as the ground rushed up. He screamed, bracing for impact. But instead of crashing, the elevator stopped gently at the bottom. Stryker stumbled out, drenched in sweat. His scientists stood there, confused, the elevator working perfectly. Back at the mansion, Stryker's mind had broken. He barely spoke, pacing the halls with wild, bloodshot eyes. The guards whispered about him, but he didn't care. He couldn't tell what was real and what was Aaron's nightmare. Night came again. He sat in his study, gun in hand, waiting. Midnight passed. No sign of Aaron. Then, at 3 a.m., the sound of ice forming. Stryker's heart froze. He turned toward the shadows, knowing what was coming. Aaron stepped out, Ice blade ready. You can't escape, Eren said calmly. I told you, I'll haunt you until you break. Stryker raised his gun, but his hand shook too much to aim. Eren's blade gleamed in the dark. Then, slice. Stryker screamed as his limbs were cut off again. He gasped, blood spraying everywhere. When he blinked, Eren was gone. His body was whole. The clock read 6 a.m. Stryker sat up in bed, panting, holding his gun tighter. It was a nightmare, but one he could never escape. Eren would make sure of that. Stryker paced the halls of his mansion, his mind unraveling with every second. Eren's cold voice still echoed in his head, the mutant's power twisting his reality into a waking nightmare. The screams of his own agony haunted him, replaying every time Eren severed his limbs, only to watch them grow back, making Stryker relive the torment over and over. He had faced mutants his entire life and fought against them in the name of God, but Eren's cruelty was different. He was a devil, an abomination that had infiltrated Stryker's very soul. Mutants were a plague, imperfections in God's creation. For years, Stryker had believed that his mission was divinely guided. He was chosen to purify the world, to remove the stain of mutants, and bring peace to humanity. But now, he was the one being tortured, hunted by the very evil he had sworn to eradicate. Tonight, something stirred deep inside him, a desperate need for divine intervention. He had devoted his life to God's work, purging the earth of mutants, but Eren was unlike any enemy he had faced. Stryker could feel his faith slipping, but that only made him cling to it harder. He would not let the devil win. He grabbed his Bible, the leather worn from years of use, and held it tightly in his hands. The scripture had always guided him and reminded him of his purpose. Mutants were demons, unnatural beings that tainted the purity of God's creation. But Eren was worse than any he had ever encountered. The torment, the mind games, this wasn't just physical. Eren had gotten into his soul. With trembling hands, Stryker thumbed through the pages, searching for solace, for a sign from God that he wasn't alone in this fight. His heart raced as he came across a verse he had read countless times before. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Eren was wicked in its purest form, a mutant who had twisted his God-given powers into something evil. He was created to fight alongside him to cleanse this world, yet, how dare he turn against his pure mission and bare his fangs at his creator? Stryker's breath came in short gasps as he held the Bible close, murmuring prayers under his breath. But then, the sound of ice forming. Stryker froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced around the room, panic gripping him. The frost crept along the window, the familiar sensation of Eren's presence sending chills down his spine. He dropped the Bible and reached for his gun, though he knew it was useless against the mutant's abilities. No, not now, he muttered, backing into the corner of the room. The frost thickened, and then Eren appeared, stepping from the shadows with that same cold, cruel smile. You think your prayers will save you? Eren whispered, his voice cutting through the room like a blade of ice. I told you, Stryker. I'll make your life a living hell. Stryker's hand shook as he raised the gun, but Eren moved too quickly. A flash of icy blue light, and Stryker's limbs were severed once again, blood splattering across the floor. He screamed, the pain unbearable, but it wasn't just the physical agony. Eren had invaded his mind, twisting his faith, and making him doubt everything he believed in. By the way, why are you asking God for help when you cloned me? Oh, and you decided to become a mutant yourself, so there's that, Eren laughed. I mean, come on, how stupid are you? Stryker gasped, the blood loss making him lightheaded. His body writhed in pain as his limbs began to grow back, but his mind was reeling from Eren's words. What do you want? He croaked, his voice hoarse. Whose clone am I? Eren whispered. Ol. F. Cug. As Stryker was about to reveal the identity of the person whose DNA he used to create Eren, his head began to swell up, followed by his entire body. Blood poured from his eyes, nose, and mouth as his body began to deform, his bones cracking under the pressure. What the hell? Eren jumped back, creating a distance between them. Stryker's body turned into a balloon as it continued to swell up. It was like that Harry Potter scene, but instead of flying away, well, he exploded. He exploded into tiny pieces, splattering all over the room. Blood and entrails painted the walls and floor. Shit. Aaron cursed as he raised a psionic barrier, shielding himself from the bloody onslaught. Freaking shit. The room was silent, only the sound of Aaron's heavy breathing echoing in the space. He looked around, confused, the pieces of Stryker's body scattered everywhere. It was a gruesome sight. Now, that's a nice ability. A trigger to prevent information leakage. How interesting. He thought, his curiosity piqued. Well, this was certainly unexpected, Aaron said with a sigh as he glared at the bloody pulp on the floor. All for one. Aaron's first-person POV. Safe base. I went straight to Stryker's office. According to what I've found from reading his memories, he kept a key and a security card. The key is for a locker in a local bank, where he kept an important data drive containing all the information about the inhumane researches he had carried out till now. Stryker was clever. Who would guess that such important files could be found in a local bank's locker? And it screams of a trap. Well, I got Phoenix Force. I'll just burn them to ashes. As for the security card, it can open and override any security measures in his lab and other hidden facilities. As far as I found out, he has 6 such facilities all over New York, all underground and secured with a biometric scanner. If I want to investigate them, I'll need that card. Maybe one of the labs holds more information about me, or it could also be on that drive. Now, some might think, why haven't I just read his mind and uncover the information? Well, I did try. I got some information, but the thing is, there was a strong mental barrier protecting his mind from my intrusion, almost like my psionic powers were blocked by an anti-psi shield. It blocked me from accessing certain parts of his memories. In other words, he either had an anti-psi chip implanted in his brain, or someone created that barrier using power stronger than mine. That was why I had to resort to torture to get the information I wanted. The thing that worried me was his last words. He was trying to reveal the name of the mastermind, and he just uttered, all before exploding. Is it all for one? There is a possibility. If I can be reborn in the Marvel world, then there is a possibility that All for One can also be reborn in this world after his death. And my power is somewhat similar to him. Am I his clone or a lab-made human, made using his DNA? Shit. Anyway, if he's in this world, then No, we have the biggest problem on our hands. God knows how many abilities he has sucked out till now. Sigh. I took the keys and security card from Stryker's office. Manhattan. Using my super speed, I made my way to the local bank with a weird name written in a language I was unfamiliar with, where the locker was stored, phasing through the exterior walls of the building like a ghost. The place was quiet, the cold fluorescent lights buzzing above. My steps echoed softly as I passed through the vault area, careful not to set off any alarms. Finding the locker wasn't difficult. Stryker's memories had given me all the details I needed. I slid the key into the lock, feeling the familiar click. The locker door swung open. But inside, it wasn't the data drive I expected. I froze. Instead of a data drive, there was a sleek black mask, the kind worn by the Black Cat. Its glossy surface gleamed under the dim light. The last time I heard of her was in the newspaper, around 3 months ago. She stole a famous piece of art from the New York Museum. I picked up the mask. A small card fell from the locker, landing softly on the floor. I crouched to pick it up, turning it over in my hand. There was a single line of text written on it in elegant handwriting. You're not the only one chasing ghosts. Let's play a little longer, shall we? F. Felicia Hardy. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to crush the card in my hand. Of course, Black Cat would have gotten involved. If there was anyone capable of slipping into Stryker's hidden vaults undetected, it would be her. She was a master thief, her skills unparalleled. But why would she take the drive? What did she gain from this? Someone hired her. That one-killed Stryker must have known about this and decided to clean up the vault. I stood up, gripping the mask tightly in my hand. She had left it here on purpose, taunting me. A game of cat and mouse, and right now, I was playing her game. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Alarm. The second the alarm blared through the bank, my muscles tensed. The high-pitched screech echoed in the vault. Of course, it's a trap. But it didn't matter. I tried to use my psychic power to check outside. Well, there were too many guards rushing toward the vault. Armed guards, heavily armored and armed to the teeth, rushed in as if they'd been waiting for me all along. They were efficient, their movements swift and coordinated. This wasn't just a random bank squad. No, these guys were military level, likely strikers people or someone hired to deal with someone like me. However, my psychic connection got cut out. I tried to turn to vapor, but it didn't work. Damn. I hate mutant suppression devices. Those bastards are so annoying. I looked up and saw several of the guards positioning what looked like high-tech rifles, their barrels crackling with blue energy. Anti-mutation devices. Damn it. Whoever set this up wasn't playing around. The entire building was rigged to suppress my abilities, turning this whole bank into a perfect cage. I adjusted the mask over my face, pulling it tighter, and pulled on my hoodie. Surrender, Subject 43. One of the guards stepped forward, his rifle aimed at my chest. Your mutation won't work here. There is no escape. Oh, I snapped my fingers, summoning the Phoenix Force. You sure about that? My body burst into flames, burning like a bonfire. The heat emanating from my body made the air around me shimmer. I raised my arms, feeling the raw power rush through me. It was time to play. The guards opened fire. I waved my hand and an invisible force field manifested itself, protecting me from the bullets. Sure enough, those devices can only suppress mutants, but Phoenix Force isn't a mutation. It's a cosmic entity. And a cosmic entity cannot be suppressed by any man-made device. I snapped my fingers again, and the force field expanded. The guards were blown away from me, crashing against the walls of the vault. Die, mother bastards! I said, unleashing the flames. The vault erupted in flames as the Phoenix Force surged through me, turning the cold, sterile walls into molten metal. The intense heat radiated outward, and within seconds, the floor beneath my feet started to crack and melt, sparks flying in all directions. I felt the power thrumming through my veins, an unstoppable force of destruction. But, unlike Jean, I was in control. The guards screamed, scrambling for cover as the fire engulfed them. Their high-tech rifles crackled and exploded under the pressure, blue energy fizzling out uselessly. I smirked beneath the mask, feeling no pity for them. Strikers men or not, they were nothing but pawns in a bigger game, and I wasn't planning to play fair. One of them managed to get a shot off, a single beam of energy aimed directly at my chest. It hit the force field, but instead of dissipating, it created a brief ripple of energy before the beam was reflected back, striking the guard square in the face. His body crumpled to the floor, the helmet's visor shattering as he fell. Pathetic, I muttered under my breath, raising my hand again. With a single thought, the entire building began to tremble. The walls groaned, metal straining against the heat and pressure. I could hear the alarms blaring louder now, a high-pitched wail that mixed with the crackling of flames and the sounds of collapsing infrastructure. It was beautiful chaos, a symphony of destruction. I let the fire consume everything. The flames curled up the walls, licking the ceiling and spreading faster than any normal fire. In minutes, the bank was nothing more than an inferno. Smoke billowed from the windows, dark and thick, swirling into the night sky. The crackling of burning wood and steel filled the air, punctuated by the occasional explosion of tech equipment overheating and combusting. As the last of the guards fell, their screams lost in the roar of the fire, I took a deep breath, allowing the Phoenix Force to cool slightly within me. I glanced around at what I had done. Total annihilation. The entire building would be reduced to ash by the time the fire department arrived, and by then, I'd be long gone. But Felicia, she was still out there, playing her little game. I clenched my fist, the heat of the Phoenix simmering just under the surface. She had taken something important, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. The drive was crucial, not just for my mission, but for understanding the deeper mystery behind Stryker's work and possibly my own origins. Still, as much as I wanted to hunt her down right now, I needed to stay low for the moment. A weird thought has been nagging me for some time now. I need to check it out. I turned to vapor and disappeared from that place. Third-person POV, location, classified, a group of doctors and scientists were busy working on several things. The area was full of high-tech computers, lab equipment, and various machines. The atmosphere was tense, everyone focused on their respective tasks. A few soldiers patrolled the area, their faces hidden behind tactical masks. Under that building was a hidden lab, and only a handful of people were allowed access. The lab was state-of-the-art, filled with cutting-edge technology and equipment. There was a massive glass tube, and inside it was a person in some kind of liquid. His face was missing, eyes and nose to be exact, and there was a weird mask over his mouth. A machine was connected to the tube, and a man was sitting in front of it, reading the monitor. It was none other than Sebastian Shaw, leader of the Hellfire Club. "Dr. Essex, how is our guest doing?" he asked, glancing at the man beside him. The man, Nathaniel Essex, was an expert in genetic research, mutation, and evolution. He was also one of the leading experts in xenobiology. He was wearing a white coat and had a bald head with sharp facial features. His eyes were red and had a creepy smile on his face. "He's stable for now," Essex replied, adjusting his glasses. "But the procedure is extremely difficult, even for someone like me." "I see," Shaw said, studying the monitor. "Any chance we can start the next phase of the project? We need the key before we can continue. Find him for me, and I'll give you what you want." Safe house, Aaron's POV. "I'm not 100% sure that they are tracking me, or maybe I'm being paranoid. Still, I get this weird feeling whenever I am outside like I'm being watched. If they are really tracking me, I need to know how. I was careful enough to avoid cameras and all those surveillance systems. Not to mention, I always kept my face covered in ice whenever I was outside doing the usual vigilante stuff. And no mutant detector could detect me. It's almost like someone is giving them information about my location, or they have a telepathic mutant with them who can track me." Sigh. Of course, my face. All they had to do was track me by my face. There are thousands of cameras around the world, and a good hacker can easily use facial recognition to find my location. Then the fact that I'm a clone. They have obviously injected some nanites into my blood, or maybe a hidden tracker in my body that can track my location, in case I escaped from their control. Shit. I need to get this paranoia out of the way, and the only way to do that is to see it myself. I mean, I turned my body temperature below 0 degrees or used flames to raise my body temperature beyond any human could endure, not to mention all these mutations I use. So if there are indeed nanites that are capable of surviving in my body even after all that, then it is bad news. I'll simply burn off everything that's not alive within my body with the Phoenix Force. I closed my eyes, focusing inward. The Phoenix Force stirred inside me, ready to burn away anything foreign. If there were trackers or nanites in my body, they wouldn't stand a chance. I raised my body temperature, letting the flames surge through my veins, burning hotter and hotter with every second. It wasn't pleasant. I mean, I was frying myself inside out. But thanks to Logan's healing factor, my body could take it. As the heat spread through my body, I could feel them. The tiny specks, almost like grains of sand deep in my skin and blood. Nanites. Strikers doing, no doubt. They were squirming, struggling as the flames burned hotter. I gritted my teeth and pushed the heat higher until I heard a faint crackling sound as the nanites started frying one by one. Pop. Another burst of heat, and I knew they were done for. The Phoenix Force had burned them to ash, clearing my system of any trackers they'd planted in me. A part of me wanted to relax, but I couldn't. If they had gone to these lengths to track me, it meant someone was watching closely. And whoever that was, they weren't done with me. This safe house isn't safe anymore. They must have noticed that their precious trackers stopped functioning. They'd send their dogs after me again. I wanted to kill them all. But why kill when they can all surrender? Well, it's time to show them who they are messing with. 6 labs, 6 underground facilities spread across New York. Each of them was filled with staff data, and no doubt more horrors of Stryker's sick experiments. I had to hit them all, but not blindly. This needed precision. If I was going to end this, I needed to do it smart, take them down without letting anyone slip through the cracks. First, I pulled up the map I'd taken from Stryker's mind, the exact locations of the labs. They were heavily secured, but that wouldn't matter. I had a plan. I cracked my knuckles and stood, feeling the power of the Phoenix Force swirl within me. I wasn't just going to destroy these labs, I was going to expose everything. Every twisted experiment, every inhumane act, every person involved. Stryker thought he was clever, hiding behind government protection and underground facilities. But he didn't count on someone like me. The S.H.I.E.L.D., X-Men, the new X-Force, the Fantastic Four, and although the Avengers haven't been officially formed, there is Tony Stark, Iron Man. None of them ever do anything about these messed up situations. So someone has to do what they can't or won't. The first lab was buried deep beneath an old abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn. The kind of place no one would look twice at. I arrived unnoticed, phasing through the walls and slipping into the underground facility. Super speed, phasing, and mind control were all it took. The security was tight. Biometric scanners, armed guards, surveillance cameras. But none of that mattered. I reached out with my psychic power, searching for the staff inside. There were about 40 people here, some of them scientists, others guards. With a simple mental push, I took control of them all. They didn't even realize as I implanted my commands. Record everything, I told them, my voice echoing through their minds. I want every piece of data, every experiment logged and documented. Then, hand it over to me. The staff moved in unison, collecting files, hard drives, and test results. They recorded the entire facility's operations, detailing every twisted experiment they had been conducting. My telepathy made them work efficiently, their hands moving as if controlled by an unseen puppeteer. It took hours, but I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to miss anything. When everything was gathered, I took the data and left, phasing out of the lab just as easily as I'd entered. The second lab was hidden under a corporate office in Manhattan. Same routine. I phased in, took control of the staff, and had them compile everything. It was tedious work, but it was necessary. Each lab I hit brought more horrifying information. Experiments on mutants, genetic splicing, weaponizing mutations. Stryker had been building an army, a force of mutants he could control, and the people funding him were deeply embedded in the government. By the third lab, I felt the weight of it all. The sheer scale of what Stryker had done was staggering, but I pushed forward. This was bigger than me. Just like all the other labs, I repeated the same thing over and over again. The last lab was the most secure, buried deep beneath the city's outskirts. I almost smiled as I slipped past the guards. For all their tech, none of them saw me coming. By the time I reached the heart of the facility, I had every person inside under my control. I made them record everything. Every experiment, every bit of research. Stryker's legacy, his entire operation, was now in my hands. With all the data in hand, I moved quickly. I found a local PC cafe, one of those dingy places with flickering screens and slow internet speeds. Perfect. I uploaded everything online, the videos, the files, the research. It went viral in minutes. News channels, social media, forums, they all lit up with the information. Stryker's crimes were out in the open now. The government, and the people who had been protecting him, were all exposed. The public was in an uproar. There was no covering this up, not anymore. For the finishing touch, I mailed a copy of everything to Yuri Watanabe. She'd know what to do with it. As for the staff in the labs, I made sure they turned themselves in, each and every one of them. I sent a single mental command, surrender, and they obeyed. All of them walked straight to the nearest police station and confessed everything. I really could have just shut down their mind, but they will get my usual 3 chances to turn their life around. The news exploded. The media couldn't get enough of it. Stryker's name was ruined. The government officials who had backed him must have been sweating bullets right about now. And probably cursing me. Good. With their names exposed and over 100 people spilling the secrets, plus the added records and transactions. It's over for those bastards. After the expose, the world had seen the darkest side of Stryker's work. The horrifying experiments, the twisted research, the hundreds of mutants who had been used as little more than lab rats. It was sickening, but it was also reality. And now those mutants, those who survived, they were under the care of Professor Charles Xavier. As for info on my identity, I went through the research data but didn't find anything about me. Sigh. I hope to get a clue at least. Oh well. I saved hundreds of lives, so I should be happy. At the present, I don't need to hide anymore. And my decision might start a war. But it was darn good to see those government bastards running around and that many people surrendering. It might get recorded in the history. Professor X's school for gifted youngsters. I used my super speed to go into the professor's office. He was just sitting there, staring out of his window. As I stopped the speed, he glanced at me with a smile. "Welcome back, Aaron," he said. "You did a very good thing." "Yeah, it wasn't easy," I said as I sat on the nearby chair. "You find anything about yourself?" he asked, turning his wheelchair to face me. No, nothing. He rubbed his chin, thoughtful. Ever heard of Hellfire Club? From what the professor told me, it would seem that Sebastian Shaw and Mr. Sinister have some sort of connection. Shaw has a lot of influence over the government, and he is one of the key people involved in Stryker's experiments. I don't know what his deal is with Sinister, but he's working with Shaw for some reason. And I can guess what that reason is. Mutant and human experiments. That insane freak could experiment to his heart's content with Shaw backing him up and providing resources. He must be the one who exploded Stryker when he was about to reveal the truth. Finally, I got a clue to uncover the truth. Where can I find Hellfire Club? I asked the professor. I'm not sure. They are a very secretive group. Their location changes all the time. They even have teleportation technology they stole from the Baxter Industries to travel between their different locations. To make things hard, even with the Cerebro, I am not able to locate any of their facilities. They are either using telepathy blocking devices or there is a strong telepath among them. Maybe both. Sigh. Technology. It seems I'll have to do this the hard way. As far as I remember, there should be a Hellfire Club base in New York, operating as a strip club. They extract information from the people and VIPs, not to mention those old government bastards seeking pleasure. Those horny fools don't know how much they are being manipulated by the people behind the curtains. If I'm correct, it should be in Manhattan somewhere. I remember that famous strip club, been there a couple of times, delivering packages, when I was working as a delivery guy. It might be that place. Emma Frost should be in charge of that place. But before that, oh boy, here she comes. The door opened and Jean walked inside the room, with an angry face. She looked at the professor and then at me, glaring. Then before I could say anything she blasted me with a powerful telekinetic force that sent me flying into a wall. Jean, the professor shouted, what are you doing? She ignored him and turned toward me as I got up. Ouch. Okay. I deserve that, I said. Shut up. You don't get to talk. What the hell are you thinking, huh? You should have called and let us know you were all right. You just disappeared, didn't answer any of our calls, and made us all worried. We thought something happened to you, she yelled angrily. I could see her phoenix force flaring up as she was glowing with a golden hue. I raised my hand in surrender. Okay. I'm sorry, but I had no other choice. Jean threw another telekinesis blast at me. I raised my hand, and a purple psionic shield appeared in front of me, blocking her attack. Stop it, Jean, the professor shouted. He's telling the truth. That's why he deserves a nice smashing. There's always a choice. Isn't that what you told me when we first met? She asked the professor as she kept throwing blasts at me. The shockwaves from the blasts destroyed the furniture and the wall. No matter how powerful you are, don't do everything alone. What if something had happened to you? There are people who care for you, Aaron. What will you do then? But No excuses. Jean walked to me and placed her fist on my chest. Next time you are thinking of doing something like this, let us know. Have a little faith in us. Or else. She left her threat hanging in the air. Sigh. She has a point, doesn't she? Things could have gone bad had they managed to seal my phoenix flames. But still, it was fun to dismantle Stryker's operations without spilling any blood. The best part was to make those people surrender without any violence. Well, with that much blow to their operation, Shaw might back down for the moment to stabilize the situation. I nodded in resignation. All right, I'm sorry. Jean smiled and pulled me into a tight embrace. Good. You know, there is something you can do to make me feel better, she whispered in my ear. I whispered back to her, there are people here. Jean chuckled as she pulled back and cleared her throat. Since your house was destroyed, why not stay here till you find a new one? She asked while giving the professor a sidelong glance. Your old room is still there. Yeah, it's not a problem. You can stay here as long as you want. The professor agreed immediately before turning to Jean. And Jean, you better repair the wall before you even think about spending time with your boyfriend. And next time when you two are having a couple fight, please do it in the open ground. There's a field back there, you know. Ah. Sure, Professor. Jean blushed a bit as she went to do what he asked. After that chaotic encounter with Jean, I decided it was probably best to make a strategic retreat while she repaired the room and calmed down. The professor gave me a knowing look, his lips twitching like he was trying not to laugh. Yeah, it was definitely time to leave. As I made my way down the hall, I couldn't help but smile. Despite the insane situation we were in, Jean's outburst hit me right in the feels. It was nice to know someone cared that much. I mean, sure, getting thrown into a wall wasn't exactly how I pictured an affectionate reunion, but hey, it's the thought that counts, right? Aaron. Kitty called, and before I could react, she phased through the wall and stood in front of me, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. Oh boy, here we go again. Hey Kitty, I said, awkwardly rubbing the back of my neck. Nope, don't even start, she interrupted, her eyes narrowing. You just disappeared. No calls, no messages, nothing. You made us all worry, Aaron. What the hell were you thinking? Great, now it was her turn. I raised my hands in defense, bracing for impact. Look, I know it was a bad move, but I had to go dark. I was up against Stryker and, I don't care if it was Stryker or Magneto or whoever. Kitty spoke before I could finish what I was saying. You could have at least let us know you were okay. Jean wasn't the only one freaking out. What if something happened to you? What then, huh? I sighed. I get it, I really do. I'm sorry. I just didn't want to drag anyone into it. Kitty's expression softened, but she was still fuming. Yeah, well, you're not alone in this. You don't have to handle everything by yourself. Her words hit harder than I expected, and for a moment, I felt like the weight on my shoulders got just a bit lighter. She was right. Again. All right. I won't ghost you guys like that anymore. Promise, I said, meaning it this time. Kitty stared at me for a second, as if judging whether to accept my apology. Finally, she sighed and shook her head. You better not, or next time it'll be more than just Jean throwing you into a wall. I smirked. Noted. By the way, were you watching her blasting me? Kitty's lips quirked up into a small smile. Maybe. It was quite amusing to watch her give you a beatdown. I rolled my eyes. Haha. Very funny. Anyway, I gotta go to my old room. Jean's busy, so wanna tag along? I asked with a flirty grin. Kitty laughed and smacked my arm playfully. Sure. I need to make sure you aren't hurt or anything. Dr. Kitty, huh? I asked with a smirk. You wanna give me a checkup? She chuckled and looped her arm through mine, pulling me close. Something like that. We made our way to my room in a comfortable silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. The last few weeks had been intense, and while I wanted nothing more than to curl up in a ball and sleep for the next 3 days straight, I knew there was still much to do. Like spending some quality time with Jean and Kitty. Maybe train a bit more with Storm and Psylocke. So, we went to my old room. Just when we sat and things were about to get fun, Kitty and I both jumped when the door suddenly swung open. I forgot to lock it. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt, Jubilee said, grinning mischievously as she waltzed in. Yeah, looks like you two were having a moment, Rogue added, following her with an equally teasing smile. I groaned inwardly. So much for quality time. Kitty shot me a quick glance, half annoyed, half amused. I swear we can't get 5 minutes alone, can we? I shrugged. Guess that's the price of being popular around here. 3 days after the chaos, things finally seemed to settle down a bit. The mess with Stryker, the emotional storm with Jean and Kitty, it all made me realize something. We all needed a break. Shaw and Sinister were going to cause trouble soon enough, so why not enjoy a little peace while we still had it? That's when I decided to book Celeste Water Park. The whole thing. Just for us. It cost a fortune, sure, but my wealth was doing nothing but gathering dust in the bank anyway. Plus, everyone at the school could use a day off. The moment Jean, Kitty, Jubilee, and Rogue found out about the trip, their faces lit up like a Christmas tree and they dragged me to the shopping mall. Since we are going to the water park, swimsuits are a must. Maybe I'll buy some special dresses for Jean and Kitty. And there I was, standing in the middle of a women's swimsuit section. I tried not to look too awkward as the girls talked and laughed among themselves while going through racks of bikinis. They were clearly up to something, exchanging looks and grins that told me this wasn't just about picking out swimwear. I looked around and saw that hot lingerie and skimpy bikinis. I should buy a couple of them for Jean and Kitty for our private fun. Jubilee was the first to test the waters. She held up a bright yellow bikini and gave me a playful look. Hey, Aaron, what do you think of this one? Too much or just enough? She winked, striking a pose for good measure. God. She'd look hot in that one. I cleared my throat and rubbed the back of my neck, trying to play it cool. Looks great, Yubes. Yubes. Look here, Rogue called her from the other end of the store. Jubilee ran to Rogue. She giggled, but Jean wasn't about to let her steal the spotlight. What about this one? She asked, holding up something that could barely be called a bikini. It was that skimpy. I'm pretty sure a little drizzle of water would make it transparent. She gave me a sly smile as if daring me to say something. I raised an eyebrow. Eek. No. Hell no. Jean stepped closer, twirling the strings of the bikini around her fingers. What? Too much for you to handle. Her voice was low and teasing, her green eyes gleaming with challenge. Nope. But not in public. Maybe in private. I replied. She chuckled and shook her head. That's the plan. What? You thought I'm gonna wear this in public? But you. I was speechless. I thought you. Okay. You got me. Jean grinned and gave me a peck on the cheek. You're so cute when you get all flustered. Then she turned to the other girls. What about you, Kitty? Kitty, not one to be outdone, grabbed a tiny black number and held it against herself. How about this, Aaron? I coughed, trying to keep my composure. Oh, Kitty. Not you too. I shook my head. That's a freaking thong. You can't even call it a bikini. And you're planning to wear that in public. Of course not, she replied, laughing. It's for our private time. I smirked, raising my eyebrows in amusement. All right then, if that's what you want. Jean shot Kitty a look, her competitive side showing. You know, Aaron, someone should help us decide. Maybe we should model them for you. Her voice was sweet, but had a sharp edge to it, clearly wanting to one-up Kitty. Kitty caught the hint and grinned, stepping closer to Jean, both of them clearly ready to push the game further. Yeah, you should probably help, Aaron. We wouldn't want to pick the wrong bikinis. I could feel the temperature in the room rising as both Jean and Kitty exchanged looks. This wasn't just casual shopping anymore. This was them seeing how much they could get to me. They were both beautiful, and the playful rivalry between them made it all the more intense. Jubilee and Rogue were on the other end of the store. Jubilee was holding up a transparent panty before Rogue, teasing her. Good, if they heard our conversation, it's gonna be a mess. How about this? I'll buy you whatever you want, and we can continue this session in my room. I asked. I like that idea, Aaron, Jean said with a smirk before putting her arm around Kitty's shoulder. What do you say, Kitty? Should we give him a show he won't be able to forget? Kitty blushed slightly and nodded. You should watch the price. Some are pretty expensive. Don't worry, I can handle it, I answered with a sly grin. Then I won't hold back, Jean replied. Both the girls went away. Phew. Suddenly, I was keenly aware that my pants were feeling unusually tight. Is it hot in here? Rogue and Jubilee were at a different part of the store, clearly leaving this little game to Jean and Kitty. I hadn't planned any of this, but damn, it was one hell of a surprise. Rogue stole a glance at me with a smile. Ah, I see what's going on. Jean must have put her up to this to keep that Jubilee busy soon. Rogue and Jubilee came with their selections. I think I'm good with this one, Rogue said, holding up a dark green swimsuit that, while not as skimpy as the others, still had its own allure. She gave me a quick smile, more shy than the others, but still clearly enjoying the attention. Yeah, looks good, Rogue, I said, doing my best to navigate the minefield of teasing without stepping on anyone's toes. Jubilee nodded. See, told ya, Rogue. That swimsuit totally screams you. Then she holds her new bikini before me. So, what about this one? It was a simple pink two-piece with frilly fabric, very feminine and definitely her style, although, admittedly, I was finding the whole thing difficult to focus on. Not bad. It fits you well. Good choice, I said and started walking toward the exit. Jubilee grinned. You kinda seem like holding back the nice compliments. Ah. Is it because of Jean or Kitty? Afraid they might get angry? Like jealous, you know, she giggled and looked at the swimsuit. Rogue glared at her. Give him a break. It's already pretty difficult. Then she looked at me and sighed, shaking her head. Really sorry for involving you in this little game of ours. Aw man. Don't spoil it. We were just about to see some interesting results, complained Jubilee. Rogue rolled her eyes. If I don't stop you, things would really get out of hand. She shook her head. Fine, fine, Jubilee conceded, throwing up her hands in resignation. After the girls finished buying their stuff, we left the mall, Jean and Kitty being the last, carrying their selections discreetly. We got into the car. Not mine, it was Hank's car. Wait. We are just going to go back. Kitty complained, turning to Jean who was sitting in the front passenger seat next to me. I mean, no food or anything. It's already lunchtime and before you say anything, lunch is on us. Since Aaron already spent so much on our clothes, it's only fair that we take care of this. Rogue, sitting in the back passenger seat agreed. That's an idea, Kit. She grinned, rubbing her gloved hands. I'm in, Jubilee agreed. What do you say? Jean looked at me, raising an eyebrow in question. Yep, let's do it, I agreed. I just know the right place. And so, our next stop was the family restaurant downtown. Third-person POV. As Aaron and the girls made their way to the family restaurant, little did they know, 2 sets of eyes had been following them from the moment they left the mall. Shaw's spies, Grant and Donovan, were discreetly parked a few cars behind, their jealousy simmering beneath their professional exterior. Grant, the older of the two at 48, grumbled under his breath. Look at him, strutting around like he owns the world. A lab-made clone with a harem of beauties. And here we are, middle-aged, single, and stuck on babysitting duty. Donovan, just a few years younger at 43, chuckled bitterly, adjusting the rearview mirror to keep a better eye on Aaron's car. You think that's bad? I've been on this job for 10 years, and not once have I gotten so much as a coffee date from anyone half as good-looking as those girls. And here he is, Mr. Perfect. Goddamn clone, he muttered, his voice thick with resentment. Clone or not, the guy's got it made, Grant added, watching as Aaron exchanged playful words with Jean in the passenger seat. He shook his head, trying to stifle the bitterness. I'd kill to be in his shoes for just one day. They continued following at a safe distance, keeping an eye on Aaron and the girls, their jealousy only growing as the group parked in front of the restaurant and stepped out, laughing and chatting. Grant clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. We're out here spying on Shaw's orders, and this lucky bastard is going to lunch with 4 gorgeous women. Donovan, sighing deeply, couldn't resist adding, and they look like they're actually enjoying his company. What the hell's the deal with that? I'll tell you what it is, Grant said, his voice laced with venom. He started the car and pulled into the parking lot, making sure to park in a spot that was out of sight of the restaurant. It was early enough that the place wasn't too packed, and there were plenty of tables available. We're not gonna let him get away with this. He's going to pay for getting all those hot women while we get nothing. What? You're not suggesting? Donovan looked at him incredulously, then glanced at the restaurant where the girls were entering. Boss will kill you. Worse, that freak friend of his might strap you in one of those machines. That's only if they catch me, Grant replied with a smirk. It's the middle of the day, everyone is busy. If I go in now and do it quick, I can be back in my seat before they notice anything. You stupid shithead. You see that woman in a red dress sitting near the window? That's Jean Grey. The moment we get in her range, she'll hear every thought in our heads. If she notices anything suspicious, we're in shit. Crap. Jean threw me a teasing look as she opened the door, nudging Kitty forward with a grin. You know, she said, tossing her shopping bags onto the bed. We still haven't shown you the other things we picked out. Kitty mirrored her smile, dropping her bag beside Jean's. She looked at me with a glint of excitement in her eyes. Didn't we promise you a show? Kitty and Jean in hot dresses. God. I'm so lucky. Maybe tonight. It's gonna be a fun and long night. All right, Aaron, Jean said, gesturing to the bed, take a seat. Just relax and enjoy. Trying to play it cool, I sat down, watching them disappear into the bathroom with soft giggles trailing behind. The anticipation was almost overwhelming, and I had to remind myself to breathe as faint whispers and laughter drifted from the other side of the door. I could imagine them in hot bikinis and lingerie. Hee. After a few moments, the door finally opened, and Kitty stepped out. She was wearing that black bikini. Her ample melons were. Well, I could see her side melons clearly. She had this sultry look in her eyes. Her usual playful smile had turned mischievous, and she gave a quick spin, showing off her outfit with a confidence that made her even more stunning. So, she asked, placing her hands on her hips. What do you think? Oh my. I got a boner. Those bubbly but cheeks and side melons. 100 points. Clearing my throat, I managed, "You look incredible, Kitty." Her smile widened. "Good answer." A soft laugh from Jean came from the bathroom as she stepped out next, wearing a vibrant red bikini that made a striking contrast against her hair. She sauntered over, twirling a lock of her fiery hair around her finger. "Enjoying the view, Aaron?" "Yes. I'm more than enjoying it." I chuckled, feeling the tension melting into a comfortable thrill. "I have to say, you both have outdone yourselves." Jean sat beside me, leaning in just close enough that her scent filled the space between us. "We figured you'd appreciate it." Her eyes sparkled as she glanced over at Kitty. "What do you think, Kitty? Shall we give him the second round now, or save it for later? Or maybe, we should tease him even more until he can barely hold back any longer." I know it sounds like fun. What about you, Kitty?" Kitty nodded. "Let's move to the second round." She grinned. "And don't worry, Aaron, it's gonna be worth it." They exchanged knowing glances before disappearing back into the bathroom, leaving me in a haze of anticipation. After a few minutes, the door opened, and Jean walked in first. She wore a red thong bikini that was even bolder than the last, with intricate straps that hugged her curves perfectly. She turned her head, flipping her hair to show off her profile. My eyes went wide as I took in the sight of her nearly exposed melons, and the skimpy thong that left almost nothing to the imagination. "I think I'm in heaven right now." "Dang. Jean, you're so hot." She laughed softly, swaying her hips as she moved closer. "It seems like you're enjoying this as much as I am." "I'm actually," I replied. Kitty walked in wearing a blue thong set with a transparent bra that left little to the imagination. The sheer fabric added a tantalizing touch, showcasing her soft, smooth skin beneath. She leaned against the doorway with her hands on her hips, giving me a slow once-over as if she were appraising my reaction. I can see her perky nipples. "Speechless?" Kitty asked, biting her lip with a smirk. "I'll take that as a good sign." "Absolutely," I managed, grinning from ear to ear. "You two look beyond incredible." Jean chuckled. "Glad you think so, Aaron," she murmured, "because we're just getting started." Her eyes were on my boner. "Are you hard?" she asked, glancing over at Kitty. I was already hard. That was the problem. I didn't want to admit it. Yup. Two hot girls are giving me a show. What do you expect? I'm not made of stone. And I bet you both knew that when you decided to put these outfits on, I said. They exchanged a knowing glance before Kitty spoke. "Then why don't you bring that big D out and stroke it while you watch us?" Jean smiled. "Or maybe you'd rather we help you with that?" Her offer sounded too good to pass up. And then Kitty hawked to it and spat on that tang. Jean stood up while grabbing my schlong. "Was that good?" she asked. "It looks like you enjoyed yourself." Kitty laughed softly. "Yeah, he sure did." "Thanks, girls." "You were awesome," I said, grinning at them both. Jean's smile disappeared for a moment. "We gotta go now. It looks like I got a new mission." "Kitty, you are coming with us this time." "Damn it. I'm so freaking horny." Talk about bad timing. She picked up her clothes and began to put them on. Kitty followed suit, glancing at me apologetically. "Sorry, Aaron. Looks like we'll have to continue this later." I shrugged. "No worries, girls." "He looks disappointed," Jean whispered to Kitty, who laughed softly in response. "Yeah, I'm really disappointed, but what can I do? Duty calls. So I guess I'll just wait for you guys. And be careful out there. Give me a call if anything goes wrong, and I'll be there in a jiffy." I put my pants on. My mind was still in the afterglow of my recent climax. "I will," Jean replied, giving me one last look before walking out the door with Kitty trailing behind. Once they left, I slumped down on the bed. Lying on my back, I stared at the ceiling. So close to a threesome, yet so far. The rendezvous point was deep in an abandoned warehouse district, shadowed and silent. Jean and Kitty walked a few paces ahead, scanning the area, while Logan, Scott, and Psylocke brought up the rear. Psylocke's purple hair glowed faintly under the moonlight, her katana sheathed but ready, her psychic senses on high alert. They had received intel on a mutant smuggler operation in this location. "Anyone else getting a bad vibe here?" Logan growled. His eyes narrowed as he glanced at the empty windows around them. "Yeah," Kitty replied as she glanced at Jean. "I was just thinking the same thing." Jean stopped, placing a hand on her temple as she reached out with her telepathy, searching for any hidden minds. Her expression grew dark as she lowered her hand. It's too quiet. I'm not sensing anyone. But I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched. Scott, always prepared, adjusted his visor. Let's stay sharp. They are probably using telepathy blocking tech. Besides, if this is a trap, they won't keep us waiting for long. Clank. Just then, a loud metallic clang echoed through the warehouse, causing everyone to tense up. Out of the shadows, several figures emerged. Standing at the forefront, a familiar face sneered at them with feral excitement, Sabretooth. His towering figure was intimidating as ever, his claws extended, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Behind him, Lady Deathstrike's fingers stretched into razor-sharp blades, while Pyro lit up his palms with bright flames, illuminating a few other hostile mutants in the background, each one itching for a fight. Well, looks like the X-Force decided to join us for a little midnight fun, Sabretooth growled, baring his teeth. Logan's eyes narrowed, recognizing his old nemesis. Sabretooth, he spat. Figured you'd be lurking in the shadows, coward. Oh, don't worry, Sabretooth replied with a grin. I'm here for more than lurking. He signaled to his team with a jerk of his head. Take them down. Before anyone could react, Pyro shot a burst of flame toward them, forcing the team to scatter. Kitty grabbed Jean, phasing them both to avoid the blazing inferno, while Logan and Psylocke dodged in the opposite direction. Scott lifted his visor slightly, firing a blast at Pyro, who deftly ducked behind a stack of metal crates, cackling as he fired back. Psylocke was the first to make a move. With her katana flashing in the dim light, she charged at Lady Deathstrike, who met her attack with a swipe of her elongated adamantium claws. The two clashed in a flurry of sparks and steel, each blow deflected by the other's skill. Psylocke dashed around her opponent, her movements fluid and graceful, striking from all angles, but Deathstrike's speed kept her on the defensive. Then she plunged the sword into Deathstrike's stomach, but she used her claws to break Psylocke's sword. Her regeneration kicked him after she pulled out the sword. Well, Psylocke smirked as she made a psionic blade, ready to continue the fight. That annoying healing. I wonder what will happen if I were to destroy your brain nerves. Why don't you come and find out? Deathstrike said before cracking her neck and rushing in. Kitty, meanwhile, had her own challenge. One of the mutants, a brawler with thick, armored skin, came charging toward her. She phased just in time, letting him pass through her before solidifying and delivering a quick punch to his side. Ouch. She flinched. That was a bad move. Her strike did little to his armored hide, but it was enough to catch his attention. Ha! The brawler grinned before rushing at her. Kitty darted away, using her agility to stay out of his reach, looking for an opening. Scott and Jean worked in tandem. Scott aimed his optic blasts at Sabretooth, trying to keep him at a distance, but Sabretooth was relentless, dodging with surprising agility and lunging at him with a roar. Jean focused, using her telekinesis to hurl nearby debris at Sabretooth, giving Scott enough time to reposition and get a better shot. Nice teamwork, Summers, Sabretooth taunted, even as he dodged another blast. But it won't save you. You talk too much, Scott replied, firing another blast that hit Sabretooth square in the chest, sending him skidding back. Jean moved quickly, using her powers to lift a piece of heavy machinery, throwing it towards Sabretooth with a flick of her wrist. He managed to slice through it, but the force threw him off balance, allowing Scott to fire a concentrated blast at him, which landed with a resounding impact. Stay down, Scott ordered. But Sabretooth only laughed, getting back on his feet with an unnerving grin. Oh, I'm just getting started. Meanwhile, Logan and Pyro were locked in a dangerous dance of flame and claws. Logan lunged at Pyro, who shot a column of fire directly at him, forcing Logan to dodge. He rolled out of the way, growling with frustration as the flames followed him. Come on, old man. Pyro taunted, waving his hands and sending flames twisting through the air. Too hot for you. Logan grinned, leaping to a metal beam above and launching himself down onto Pyro with terrifying speed. Pyro stumbled, momentarily stunned, as Logan's claws sank into his shoulder. Arg! Damn it! Pyro screamed, but Logan was relentless, landing punch after punch until Pyro managed to break free, staggering back with burns of his own. Not so arrogant now, are ya? Logan growled, advancing on the wounded Pyro. Pyro grabbed his right shoulder and staggered, trying to stand up. Shit. Damn you. He gritted his teeth before unleashing a torrent of fire from both hands. Bad move, bub, Logan said before charging in. As Pyro's flames engulfed him, his healing factor immediately kicked in, healing his burnt skin. He jumped forward at a blinding speed, punching Pyro's stomach and knocking the air out of him. Pyro flew in the air before slamming hard into a pile of wooden crates. Erf. As Pyro fell to the ground, Logan picked him up by the collar of his costume, staring him down. Coward and traitor, that's what you are. Damn you, old man. Pyro coughed before spitting blood onto Logan's face. Logan just wiped it off with his sleeve and headbutted Pyro. The younger man grunted as his nose was broken and he was knocked unconscious. Logan threw him to the ground and turned to the other enemies. Amidst the chaos, Jean's eyes narrowed as a powerful telepathic signal suddenly bombarded her mind. She gritted her teeth, trying to shield herself from the invasive presence. It was then she realized someone was dampening her powers, weakening her telekinesis and telepathy. Scott, she called, barely managing to send him a mental warning before the dampening force surged again. They're using a power suppressor. I can't hold them off. Scott turned to her, worry flashing in his eyes. Jean, focus on staying safe. We'll get through this. But before she could reply, Sabretooth charged her, taking advantage of her weakened state. He knocked her down, pinning her to the ground with a wicked grin. Looks like the redhead's out of her league, he sneered, claws raised. Just as he was about to strike, Scott aimed his visor directly at Sabretooth's face, blasting him off of her. Jean scrambled to her feet, clutching her side where Sabretooth's claws had grazed her. You okay? Scott asked, steadying her. Jean nodded, grimacing in pain. I'll manage. Meanwhile, Psylocke was in a fierce struggle with Lady Deathstrike. With her telepathic abilities partially suppressed, she relied on her martial skills and instincts. She dodged a swipe from Deathstrike, flipping backward before launching a psychic knife toward her opponent's mind. Deathstrike barely flinched, her own resilience deflecting much of the mental attack. That's all you got. Deathstrike taunted, striking back with her claws. Psylocke ducked and slashed with her psionic blade, managing to graze Deathstrike's arm. I don't need much to take you down. Before Deathstrike could retaliate, Kitty joined in, phasing through the ground and grabbing hold of Deathstrike's legs. She phased them partially, disrupting Deathstrike's balance, giving Psylocke the opening she needed. With a quick slash, she managed to land a solid hit on Deathstrike, causing her to stumble. Kitty smirked, tightening her grip. Not so tough when you can't touch me. Deathstrike snarled, thrashing in frustration as she struggled to break free. As Psylocke advanced on Lady Deathstrike, a sharp crack echoed through the air, barely noticeable amidst the clamor of battle, but unmistakable to those who had heard it before. In an instant, Psylocke's body jerked backward, a sniper's bullet piercing her shoulder. She staggered, clutching her wound as crimson blossomed across her uniform. Psylocke! Kitty cried, darting forward to catch her as she collapsed to one knee. The wound was severe, blood seeping through Psylocke's fingers as she pressed them tightly over it. But the danger was far from over. Another shot rang out, then another, each bullet aimed with deadly precision. Jean, sensing the growing threat, reached out with her mind, straining against the telepathic suppression to detect the hidden assailants. Sniff. Sniff. Logan's nostrils flared, picking up the faint scent of gunpowder in the air and the subtle rustle of movement high above. As Psylocke struggled to hold onto consciousness, Jean focused, using her waning telepathy to trace the sniper's locations. Her eyes met Logan's, and in an instant, she transferred a rough map of their positions directly into his mind. Logan, she managed through gritted teeth. They're stationed above. 3 snipers, spread out along the mezzanine. You need to take them out. Logan's lips curled into a feral grin. Just what I needed, a little hunt. Without another word, he sprinted, launching himself up to a ledge before hurtling over to a rusted staircase. Gunshots cracked in the air, and Logan could feel the bullets rip through his skin, but his healing factor surged immediately, knitting his wounds shut almost as fast as they appeared. Unfazed, he climbed higher, adrenaline and fury driving him forward. As he neared the first sniper's position, he caught sight of a shadow moving to reload. Logan leaped forward, landing directly in front of the shooter. The man barely had time to gasp before Logan's claws plunged into his chest, silencing him in a single strike. Logan pulled his claws out and moved on, leaving the body slumped in the dark. Shots rang out from behind him. Another sniper had caught onto his approach. Logan twisted, feeling a bullet tear through his side before his healing kicked in again, closing the wound. He snarled and launched himself into a sprint, dodging erratic shots as he reached the sniper. Without hesitation, Logan slashed downward, disarming the man in a brutal arc before hurling him off the ledge to the ground below. The third sniper, seeing Logan's ferocious approach, abandoned his position, bolting toward an emergency exit. But Logan was faster. In a matter of seconds, he closed the distance, grabbing the man by the collar and throwing him hard against the wall. The sniper struggled, raising his weapon, but Logan's claws slashed through the barrel, rendering it useless. Logan leaned in, growling, his eyes gleaming with fury. "Big mistake aiming at my team." He smashed his claws into the sniper's chest, instantly killing him. The X-Force had fought with everything they had, but they were losing ground fast. Reinforcements swarmed into the warehouse like a wave, the new mutants flanking their sides and cutting off any route of escape. Psylocke knelt, struggling to keep her balance as her blood-soaked fingers pressed tightly to her shoulder wound. Kitty and Jean stood back to back, both visibly exhausted, while Scott, stripped of his visor, clenched his eyes shut, trying to keep his energy at bay. Logan growled low, claws ready, standing protectively between his teammates and the advancing mutants. Blood matted his sideburns, his own injuries barely healed before new ones appeared. Yet, he held his ground, a primal force refusing to back down. "Give up already," sneered Sabretooth from the edge of the melee, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Your little team's barely holding on." "Shut up and get over here," Logan growled. "I ain't through with you." Sabretooth's grin widened. "Gladly." He signaled to his team, who surrounded the weakened X-Force. Logan slashed at a nearby enemy, teeth bared, but their sheer numbers overwhelmed him. Blows landed from all sides, forcing him down to one knee. Jean staggered, clutching her head as a fresh wave of psychic suppression crashed over her. Blood trickled down her nose, her vision blurring as she struggled to fight through it. I can't hold on." "Jean." Kitty tried to grab her. "Jean, hang in there." But she could no longer stand. She crumpled to her knees, vision swimming as the suppressor drained the last of her strength. Psylocke staggered beside her, barely able to lift her psionic blade. Amid the chaos, a sudden shift in the air froze the battle. The last of the reinforcements halted, stepping aside, as a dark figure entered through the main warehouse doors. Sebastian Shaw, with his impeccably tailored suit and a sly, confident smile, surveyed the battered X-Force. "That's enough," Shaw commanded, his tone laced with a calm authority. The remaining fighters held back, allowing him to step closer, his gaze cold and calculating as he studied each of them. Shaw stopped a few feet away from the team, his eyes settling on Scott and Jean, taking in their weakened state. It's truly impressive to see the legendary X-Force fighting with such tenacity. But unfortunately, it's over. He paused, letting the silence draw out. "I have an offer. One of you will go free, back to your headquarters. All I ask is that you deliver a message to Aaron." Logan clenched his fists, blood dripping from his claws as he glared at Shaw. "You think we're just gonna walk away? After what you did?" Shaw chuckled, unfazed. "Walk away? No, not quite. I expect one of you to leave, to bring Aaron to me. I have no interest in keeping you all." He looked pointedly at Jean and Kitty. "But I think you'd rather avoid a fight you can't win, given the condition your team is in." Psylocke stepped forward, grabbing her bleeding shoulder. "And if we refuse?" Shaw's smirk grew. "Then I'll have my men continue until you're all incapacitated. But I'd prefer to avoid unnecessary mess. I'm only interested in Aaron, after all." He folded his arms, waiting for an answer. Jean glanced at her teammates, taking in their battered appearance and exhausted expressions. Then she turned to Logan, meeting his gaze. His eyes softened slightly, and Jean knew they were thinking the same thing. They can't handle much more. "Should I use my Phoenix Force? But what if it goes out of control again?" Then she remembered what Aaron said before they were leaving. He told them to give him a call if they were in trouble. But would it be a wise choice to bring Aaron into this mess? Shaw wants him, and if she calls him right now, Shaw might capture him. However, Jean remembered that night. Their first date night, When Eren showed her his power to control Phoenix Force and the fact that he took down 3 Omega-level mutants alone, not to mention, dismantled Stryker's operation alone. No. He can do it. I just know it. She reached out for her phone in her pocket and pressed the speed dialer. With the professor's help, he should be able to find us in no time. Just then, Psylocke stepped forward. You think we'll sell out our friend just because our lives are in danger, she growled. If that's what you think, then you've made a fatal mistake. She threw 3 psionic daggers at Shaw in the hope of at least one of them hitting him, but to her surprise, the daggers were absorbed by him. Shaw just laughed. I'm sorry, but you'll need to try harder than that. He pointed his finger at Psylocke and unleashed a burst of kinetic energy at her. Logan quickly jumped in front of Psylocke, shielding her with his body as Shaw's attack hit. The force sent them both crashing backward into the wall. Logan coughed up blood. Damn, bastard. He growled. Logan. Kitty called out. Damn it. Psylocke crashed hard against the wall. Her head was spinning as her consciousness faded. Why? She thought to herself as everything around her became hazy. I can't die here. Not like this. Enough. I'll give you one more chance. I want that clone at any cost. So please don't make things difficult for me, Shaw said with a hint of irritation in his tone. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, chilling the air almost to a painful degree. A frost crept over the ground, forming intricate glistening patterns across the concrete floor. Within moments, a light flurry of snow began to fall inside the warehouse, casting a ghostly haze around them. Outside, snow swirled from a sky that had been clear only moments before, the flakes swirling as though pulled by an unseen force. You all are so in deep shit, Jean said with a large grin. Logan, Kitty, and the others shivered involuntarily, feeling the unmistakable aura of ice energy filling the room. Shaw's grin widened, his eyes glinting with an unsettling confidence as he clenched his fists, barely able to conceal his excitement. So he decided to show up after all, he said softly, eyes scanning the room for any sign of the newcomer. Eren stepped into the frigid warehouse, his expression as calm as the frost-covered air. His gaze swept over the battleground, lingering momentarily on his battered teammates. With a flick of his wrist, a surge of icy energy radiated outward, freezing the reinforcements in place. Tendrils of frost crept up their bodies, encasing them in thick layers of ice until not a single enemy mutant moved. They stood frozen like statues, their expressions of surprise and fear immortalized within the ice. He walked past Shaw without sparing him a glance, each step silent on the snow-covered ground. He knelt beside Psylocke, his eyes softening as he took in her blood-soaked form. Gently, he placed a hand on her shoulder. A soft blue light appeared under his hand as he transferred his healing ability to help her. Almost instantly, her wounds healed, and her breathing became calm. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Eren, she whispered, trying to sit up. Stay still, he murmured, his voice low and reassuring. I'll handle this. As Psylocke stabilized, Eren moved to Jean, who was barely clinging to consciousness. Blood ran down her face, and her energy was depleted to a dangerous level. Eren sensed the Phoenix Force simmering beneath her skin, dangerously close to breaking free. He placed a hand on her forehead, his power flowing through her as he whispered, Rest, Jean. I'll take it from here. With a soft sigh, she fell into a deep sleep. Eren looked at her face for a moment. He felt rage boiling in his heart. She was bleeding from her nose due to overusing her power. He took out a handkerchief and wiped her blood from her face. How dare those bastards? He stood up and turned to face Shaw. Shaw's eyes glinted with a dangerous curiosity as he finally had Eren's full attention. So, the infamous Eren makes his grand entrance. I must admit, I'm impressed by your timing. Eren's expression remained impassive, his gaze cold as the frost around him. You've hurt my friends, he stated, his voice dangerously calm. That's a mistake you won't get to make twice. Shaw chuckled, seemingly unfazed. Come now, I expected you to be more pragmatic. They're collateral damage. I'm interested in you, Eren. You possess power unlike any mutant I've encountered, and I'd rather not waste potential on needless hostility. Come with me. Don't you want to know who you really are? I'll help you unlock your true potential. Eren's eyes narrowed, the temperature dropping further as his aura intensified. A wave of cold snow dust swept over the area. You think you can manipulate me, Like one of your chess pieces? Everyone is a piece on the board, Shaw replied smoothly. You just happen to be a piece of extraordinary value. He tapped the side of his head. Besides, if you think you can use your telepathy to read my mind to find your answers, go ahead and try, he said with a confident smile. Bastards, just where the heck are they getting so many nullifers and all that mutation suppression shits? Aaron wondered. Logan picked up Scott's goggles and put them on Scott's face to prevent his optic blasts from hitting any of them. Hey kid, Logan grunted as he walked over to Aaron. Let's do this together, shall we? No need. They are already dead, Aaron said and used his super speed. Those frozen mutants were like a food platter for him. He checked each of their mutations and absorbed the fire, stone skin, acid, and poison-related ones into his body. He could feel that his power was growing stronger at an astonishing rate. As for the rest, they were just regular mutations, and absorbing them would be just a waste of time. Then he appeared where he was standing before. He snapped his fingers as the frozen mutants shattered into pieces. The fine dust of ice blew in the air as over 20 mutants died in a second. I must admit, that was impressive, Shaw said. He could feel the change in Aaron's energy after he killed the mutants. Killing without even blinking an eye takes years of killing experience, and I guess you have a lot of it. Well, clone or not, his blood is definitely running through your veins. You are next. Aaron pointed his finger at Shaw. Shaw just grinned and raised his hands in mock surrender. Wait, let me ask you one question before you kill me. What? Aaron asked. Shaw smiled and said, Is it worth it? Sacrificing yourself to save these people? Your team? This is all about power, Aaron. Power is everything in this world. It decides who lives and who dies. If you follow me, I will help you get the answers to your questions. You will become the most powerful mutant alive. So what will it be? As soon as Shaw finished, Aaron's palm appeared before his face. Exactly, power is everything in this world. It decides who lives and who dies. He grabbed his face and slammed him down on the floor. He lifted him and slammed him down again. The concrete beneath Shaw cracked, splintering like glass. Shaw grimaced but quickly countered, unleashing a burst of kinetic energy that threw Aaron backward. Aaron landed gracefully, sliding a few feet before he steadied himself. Impressive, Shaw said as he stood up, brushing the dust off his suit. But you'll need more than brute force to beat me. Aaron's gaze remained icy, but his hands began to crackle with energy. If he wanted, he could have absorbed Shaw's power. But he wanted to see how Shaw was using his power, his movements, his weakness, and every detail of power. Only then would he absorb his power. Then let's see if you can absorb this. He raised his arms, and beams of intense cold shot toward Shaw, freezing the air around him and forming deadly spikes of ice. Shaw dodged, his agility surprising, but Aaron anticipated it and formed a barrier of ice around him, boxing him in. Then burst him with ice spikes. Shaw laughed, pressing his hands to the frozen walls. All you're doing is feeding me, he taunted, as the energy transferred into him, fueling his own power. In a sudden explosion of kinetic force, Shaw shattered the icy prison, sending shards everywhere. Aaron raised a hand, absorbing the shards back into himself to prevent any collateral damage to his teammates. Get out of here. I can't use my full power to fight him, he told Psylocke and Logan. They understood. Logan carried Jean and rushed out of the warehouse with Psylocke, Scott, and Kitty. They left the battlefield with Aaron and Shaw fighting. Shaw stomped on the floor, releasing a massive burst of energy. The whole warehouse shook, and the ground split open, shattering the frozen warehouse and his cage, but Aaron raised an ice domain around them almost instantly. A massive dome of ice covered the area. Shaw cracked his neck, grinning. What else you got other than just ice? I know you can use multiple. Hug. He glanced at his hands, forced bites. You know, kinetic energy manipulation is a cool power, but what if there is no kinetic energy to absorb? Aaron said with a smirk, as the temperature continued to drop. Shaw's legs froze as he felt hard to breathe. He tried to move his arms and legs to use his stored energy to blast through everything, but he could barely move anymore. He froze up instantly. Frostbites began to form on his skin, spreading quickly. Aaron walked toward Shaw and touched his head. Well, I'll take your power. Thank you. How? Shaw asked with chattering teeth. I learned to freeze molecules by slowing them down. I can freeze you from the inside out, and when I do that, you have no energy to transfer into your body to warm yourself up. Even if you manage to use your power, your body will shatter like a glass doll. Aaron began absorbing Shaw's power and started feeling the energy flow into his body. Interesting. So much power, yet an obvious weakness. Just then, a black smoke appeared behind Shaw. It was Azazel. He tried to grab Shaw and teleport away, but, clank, he froze instantly and fell to the icy ground with a clank. What's the rush? Aaron said as he finished absorbing Shaw's power and touched Azazel's head. And don't try to teleport away. I have frozen every molecule in your body. Even your brain is frozen solid. I doubt that you can even hear me. Well, thanks for the meal. He absorbed Azazel's power. He turned to Shaw, who was frozen up to his neck, and asked, I want to know the answers to my questions, but considering this insane ability, I can take a guess. Is it all for one? The guy without a face and a mask, covering up to his nose. Shaw wanted to say something, but everything turned black before his eyes. It felt so sleepy and peaceful. He felt tired. He could hear Aaron's voice like a distant memory. Aaron punched through his frozen body and ripped out his frozen heart, crushing it in his palm. Then he stomped on Azazel's head and crushed it into fine dust. Thanks to you bastards, I now know what to do next. I'll destroy every single bastard behind this clone shit. Only then will I get to live a peaceful life. The ice domain disappeared as Aaron released his power. The air was still cold, but the snowstorm had stopped. Aaron took a deep breath and looked at the shattered bodies around him. He didn't feel any guilt for them. They deserved it. He touched the ground and used his phoenix flames to burn every single trace of DNA from Shaw, Azazel, and their teammates. He knew about Azazel's power of immortality and magic. So there was a chance that he might somehow come back to life. But before the Phoenix Force, his power of immortality and magic was useless. Then he left the warehouse. Outside, the others were waiting for him. All this time, he had been hiding his ability to use multiple powers, and the professor went his way to manipulate their minds. But after using that firepower, hiding wasn't an option anymore. Back then, he was weak. That changed. The present Aaron is strong, probably strongest with the Phoenix Force under his control. Kitty ran up to him. Are you all right? What about Shaw? She asked. The others followed behind her and stood before him. They were worried about him and confused as to how he came that fast, not to mention using other powers than ice. Aaron smiled. Don't worry. I took care of him. He looked at Jean. How is she doing? Logan said, she's still knocked out, but fine. Good. You guys go back, Aaron said. What about you? Scott asked. Aaron glanced at Jean and answered. I'm going to take a long walk. He planned to raid the Hellfire Club branches and destroy them completely to prevent another situation like this from happening, and probably discover the real identity of the original body he was cloned from. If it's all for one, then things would become dangerous in the future, and considering how he himself didn't take steps and send Shaw for the job, Aaron was certain that if his prediction is correct, then all for one might be in a weakened state. He might stand a chance. And if his prediction is wrong and it isn't all for one, that's even better, he'll just get rid of them. Don't even think about going to the Hellfire Club, Psylocke said. She knew what he was planning. Bamf. Aaron disappeared from their sight, leaving a black smoke behind. He's going there, isn't he? Logan asked. Yes, Psylocke said. She turned around. Let's head back. Scott, call Agent O and ask her to take care of the scene. Meanwhile, New York, Hellfire Strip Club. Back to Aaron's first-person POV. I appeared around the alley of a strip club, the world spinning slightly as I steadied myself. Teleportation was different. It felt like being sucked into a black hole, then spit out the other side. Definitely something I'd need to get used to. All right. Time to change my looks, I muttered to myself. With Azazel's power now flowing through me, a bit of concentration gave me access to some shape-shifting abilities. I felt my face shift, my body adapting to a different form, though I'd need new clothes to match if I was going to make it inside. Oh, as for whom I transformed into? It was one of the mafia bosses from my past life. An arrogant bastard with a good face. Well, I used my super speed to go to the nearest clothing store, picked a nice suit, wore it, and like a good citizen paid through the QR code for it before speeding out. Everyone is making a living out there, So stealing things just like that might have cost that poor receptionist or worker their job. Now, I stood outside the strip club, the lights flashing outside and a bouncer standing by the door. Well, this should be fun. I walked up, the man staring at me with narrowed eyes as I approached. He put a hand out, blocking me from entering. VIP night today. Show your card, he said in a gruff voice, his muscles bulging underneath a tight black shirt. I used my mind control on him and took a peek at his memories, which I shouldn't have. Now, I feel sorry for him. This guy's name is Thinkers. What kind of parents name their kids Thinkers? His mother was a stripper and his dad, well, one of her mother's regulars. His wife cucked him with one of the other bouncers, who is this guy's boss because he couldn't satisfy her with his pinky. He took many pills and even Chinese medicine. Ha ha ha, he got scammed. Now he found out, but couldn't divorce her because he didn't want to lose 50%. And every now and then, his boss swings by his house to smash his wife and mom. And this guy just takes it. That's one messed up situation. As a result, he trolls others on the internet, especially on Webnovel. I just showed you my card, what the hell are you still blocking me for? His eyes turned glassy for a second. My mistake, sir, he muttered. Go right in. He stepped aside, letting me pass. I passed him by, keeping my arrogant face. I stepped into the club, greeted by the flash of red and purple lights illuminating the dark interior. Heavy bass from the speakers vibrated through the floor, mingling with the scent of alcohol and smoke. The place was packed, people crowded around tables, dancing on platforms, and lounging in private booths. Waitresses in tight dresses walked through, serving drinks, while men in suits exchanged cash, doing deals. Others simply enjoyed the company of women dressed in almost nothing, laughing and blowing smoke from cigars or something stronger. Then there was this VIP area where naked women were dancing and those closed-door booths. Better than the outer ones, but more expensive. I walked deeper into the club, the noise washing over me, and I focused on keeping my expression that of a man used to this kind of scene. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. As I moved through, I casually reached out with my mind, feeling the thoughts and emotions around me. These people were pretty easy to read. They were mostly thinking about smashing, booze, drugs, or money. Sometimes all four at the same time. Well, their life and money. Who am I to get in their way and judge them? Heck, I love smashing and money, minus the booze and drugs. A few were plotting to kill each other, yet they were laughing and drinking together without a care in the world. One of them, or probably both of them, would get killed tonight. Oh, the reason, some might ask. One guy is smashing the other guy's wife, and the other guy is smashing the first guy's mom. Both of them found out about each other, but no one said anything and just enjoying the night for now. It's like watching a bad drama. And another group of guys, one of them was actually a woman. They were planning to do a BDSM session later in the VIP area. Damn, I'm getting distracted. I need to get back on track and focus. Hey baby, wanna have some fun? A MILF in an expensive red dress stepped up beside me, her face covered in makeup and her melons almost popping out of her top. Those are silicone-stuffed tits, no doubt. She even has a branded bag in her left hand. She's a VIP. I could really use some young meat, she said, tracing a finger across my chest. What do you say? I'll eat your butt if you want. I read her mind and she was really high and horny as hell. Her name is Victoria and she's 48. A divorced housewife with a kid in college. She comes here often and hunts young men to sleep with. She likes it when they're young and dominant. And she definitely has a thing for eating butts. Well, that's a messed up woman. Thanks for the offer, but maybe another time, I told her. Oh, come on, don't be shy. I know you want it. Just follow me and I'll give you a night you'll never forget. She said and moved to pull me away, but I stopped her using telepathy and made her go away. That was weird. I went up to the VIP area. I needed to find someone who knew the inner workings of this place. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll find Emma Frost tonight. 3 guards stood stationed at the end of the hallway, guarding a black door. I could sense they were sharper than the average bouncers, maybe even mutants themselves. Focusing on their thoughts, I sifted through the surface noise. There it was, a hidden elevator leading down to the basement. The place had private rooms and cages, with mutant girls put on display for their so-called VIPs. The people who frequented that area had a taste for power and control, more often than not getting off on dehumanizing others. And it wasn't just any mutants. They made sure it was someone rare or particularly vulnerable. Emma Frost was here tonight. She was deep in that basement, overseeing things in her usual aloof manner, likely dressed in white and basking in her status. The guards were jittery. Emma had given strict orders not to be interrupted. All right, game time. My target was Emma Frost. There's a possibility that she might have sensed me using telepathy. Even if she didn't, she'd sense me soon enough. And if she did, she might escape or try to use her mind control power to get information out of me. Only time will tell. I straightened my suit, took a breath, and reached out with my telepathy to make the guard see me as just another VIP. As I approached, the guard nodded, "Evening, sir," then punched a code on the panel next to the door. It opened, revealing an elevator waiting to take me down to the club's hidden floors. I stepped in. The doors slid shut. The elevator descended smoothly. The elevator doors opened, revealing a dimly lit, sprawling basement floor with a suffocating atmosphere. Then there was this weird sweet scent in the air. The music was muted here, just a steady, almost hypnotic beat pulsing through the room. All right, super speed time. I used my speed. Everything around me seemed to stand still. As I moved through the rooms, I saw the people trapped in Emma's illusions, each absorbed in their private fantasy or nightmare, oblivious to everything around them. Some lounged back with idiotic grins, their eyes glassy as they reached for things that weren't there. Others were in various states of undress, slumped or draped over furniture as though drunk, some whispering to invisible lovers or laughing like maniacs at jokes only they could hear. They were entirely consumed by what they thought was real, and that sweet cloying scent hanging in the air kept them entranced. I stopped briefly in one of the rooms to observe. There was a woman hugging an empty space, murmuring sweet nothings to thin air, as though she was speaking to a loved one. In another corner, two men were fist-fighting each other, each convinced they were mortal enemies, fueled by the false memories Emma had implanted in them. Their movements were sluggish, ridiculous even, as they flailed and shouted nonsense. What a joke, I thought, moving on. It was like watching animals in a zoo. Then there were the booths. From the outside, they appeared like simple glass enclosures, but inside, Emma had laced them with such potent telepathic illusions that the occupants were completely oblivious to their surroundings. Some VIPs inside were giggling, thinking they were in paradise with a harem of perfect partners, others indulging in feasts that didn't exist. I saw through Emma's tricks as if they were transparent, but to those inside, the illusions were as vivid as their memories. Each hallucination held the person firmly in place. And this wasn't just Emma's telepathy alone. That sweet hallucinogen-laced scent enhanced everything, amplifying her powers and creating an environment where the lines between reality and illusion blurred beyond repair. It was brilliant, an insidious web that fed her every sadistic whim. I'm lucky mind control doesn't work on me. Finally, after searching through 10 such rooms, I finally found a room that looked suspicious because there was a telepathy barrier around it. No mind control shit will work in there other than the one in charge. Interesting way to create a barrier. I phased through the door and saw the blonde beauty herself lying on a sofa, watching the live footage on the multiple screens fixed on the wall. Her white dress barely covered her body. The way it hugged her form, I knew she'd worn it to emphasize her curves, showing off her long, slender legs. That well-toned tummy and generous cleavage left little to the imagination. It was hard not to notice. But even more noticeable than that were her piercing blue eyes that seemed to cut right through me. I have to admit, the comics and movies don't do her justice. Emma Frost in the flesh was stunning. I placed a hand just above her forehead, letting my own telepathy mesh with hers while I siphoned off her power with ease. Emma's abilities were intricate, but with my experience, it was like untying a set of threads, each leading me deeper into her unique skill set. There was resistance. Her mind shielded some memories, especially personal ones. Wait, is that chat? There was only her face, and Emma was looking for her. Everything related to her other than that was locked up. I could feel her sadness around chat's memory bubble. Luckily for me, I was able to get access to her training sessions. As I absorbed the knowledge, a smirk played on my lips. I reached for the small ornate bottle on the table beside her. The same cloying scent that wafted through the rooms below was in here, concentrated, a hallucinogen designed to amplify and intertwine her victims' experiences. I lifted the bottle, uncorking it and swirling it in front of her face, the thick, sweet mist curling from the vial and covering her. Dang. It's so fun to mess with things when you have super speed. No one will notice anything. And the limit of how long I can hold on to this speed was... shit. I felt dizzy, and I felt as my muscles were burning up. I must be reaching my limits. But Logan's healing factor kicked in and healed me immediately. I went to the opposite side and sat on the chair, releasing my speed. Emma jumped up in shock, seeing an outsider sitting opposite hers. She threw a telekinetic blast at me. I instantly raised a barrier around me, and as soon as the blast crashed, I absorbed the kinetic energy. So there was just a wisp in the air, nothing more. Shaw's mutation is kinda nice. And I never thought she had mastered telekinesis to this level. It must be hidden in one of those blocked memories. Interesting. Telekinesis, huh? Emma grabbed her head as the scent began to show its magic. She stumbled but refused to fall to her knees. Wow. Easy now, I said with a smirk. What the hell are you? Emma hissed. Aaron, I said simply. Emma's face twisted in anger. You think you're going to get away with this? She tried to give me one of those dangerous pain inducements through telepathy, but sadly for her, it's useless against me. Damn you. She cursed after failing. What? Couldn't get in here. I grinned, tapping the side of my head. Sorry, your tricks won't work on me. She tried to use her telepathy to shut off my senses, to make me blind and deaf. It's not working. I grinned, sorry, still not working. Try harder. I'm sure you have some better tricks in that pretty head of yours. I'm looking forward to them. Show me what you got. Emma clenched her teeth in frustration. You think this is a joke? Not a joke. Just a challenge, I said calmly. What the hell do you want? Emma glared at me, her blue eyes burning with hate. I want to help you become the big boss of this place. You see, I came here after killing Shaw and around 50 of his team, maybe more, I didn't keep count. So, here's the deal. You help me find my original body from which I'm cloned, I said as I transformed into my real form. And I'll eliminate all the heads who are controlling you and even kill Kingpin. With him gone too, it would be like a walk in the park for you to take over the entire power that rules New York and more. So, what do you say? You are bluffing. A clone with killer nanites in his body could never kill Shaw. What was your power? Super speed and telepathy proof? Is that how you entered here? Emma asked incredulously. Why don't you give him a call and see for yourself? Oh, and you should stop acting like that drug is affecting you. You already cleared your mind as soon as you saw me. So there's no way some hallucinating agent would work on an Omega-level telepath mutant like you, I said calmly, leaning back on the chair, and putting my feet on the table. Emma smirked as she stretched her arms. Then she sat back on the sofa with her legs crossed, and she was wearing a white panty. She then pulled her phone over from the table with telekinesis and dialed a number, but no one picked up. Then she dialed another number, and her cool and calm face flinched for a flicker second. She was good all right. She knows how to mask her expression, but I can still see through it. She then looked at me. So you're telling the truth? I won't lie. It would be a waste of time for both of us. She leaned forward, giving me a nice view of her cleavage. What makes you think I'd just join hands with you after you killed my boss and half of my people? Simple, I said, leaning forward to meet her gaze. Because I can help you achieve what you've been trying to do all these years. I can help you find her. Her. Aren't you looking for chat? Emma's gaze was icy as she looked at me, but behind the steel in her eyes was a storm of memories, each one heavier than the last. I could tell she was deciding whether to trust me, just how much to reveal. Chat. She said slowly, as if just saying her name called something painful to life. Yes, I'm looking for her. But it's not what you think. I didn't get into all this for power or control. At least, not at first. Her voice had lost some of its cold, practiced authority, softened by something deeper, something raw. Her hands twitched in her lap, restless, as though trying to keep herself from falling completely into memory. We weren't always like this, she murmured, eyes narrowing as they fixed somewhere beyond me, as if watching ghosts from her past. Chat and I, we were just two girls, struggling to get by. No family, no place to belong, only each other. Emma let out a soft, humorless laugh. We got into trouble, the small kind, at first. Pickpocketing, some minor cons. Chat always hated it, but she stuck with me. She was loyal, maybe too loyal. But then came the night we tried for something bigger. We didn't mean for it to go that way. But that night changed everything. I listened in silence, watching the flicker of her expression, the way she clenched her fists and kept her voice steady even as the pain of memory leaked through. We were just going after some big shot who looked like easy prey. He was rich, bored, and ripe for the picking. But when we crossed his path, that's when we found out who he really was. Bakuto. I'd heard the name before. Bakuto, one of the leaders of the Hand. Ruthless, patient, and as unforgiving as a blade. Emma's hands balled into fists, her knuckles going white as she continued. We didn't even get close. He saw us coming from a mile away. At first, we thought it was just bad luck, that we'd been sloppy. But we never even stood a chance. I felt something, pressure, darkness, closing in on us before we could do a thing. I'd never felt fear like that. I didn't know it then, but that was when my telepathy began to wake up, spurred on by sheer survival instinct. And still, it wasn't enough. Emma's voice dropped, her face grim as she went on. Bakuto's men closed in fast, surrounding us. Chat grabbed my hand and whispered to me to keep calm, that she had a plan. And she reached out. She always had this gift with animals, you see. Her lips curled into a bittersweet smile, her voice momentarily softening. Animals loved her, followed her wherever she went. She could sense their emotions and communicate with them in a way that always amazed me. When we were kids, she would sit in the park and have flocks of birds perch on her arms. Raccoons scurry from the shadows to greet her. And that night, she called them to help. Emma's eyes grew distant, and it was as if she were seeing it all unfold before her again. I'll never forget the way she stood there, completely still, completely calm, as I felt her calling out into the dark. Suddenly, they came. Stray dogs, alley cats, and even crows from the rooftops, all answering her call. They poured in from the shadows, snarling and screeching, a force of sheer chaos. I watched as they swarmed around Bakuto's men, biting, clawing, and tearing at them with an intensity I'd never seen before. She was like a conductor of some wild orchestra of nature, holding them back just enough to give me a chance to escape. Her voice trembled, just for a moment. But I was too slow. I wanted to pull her with me. I was shouting her name, but she wouldn't come. She just kept telling me to go. "Run, Emma," she said. "I'll keep them back. Just run." Emma's face hardened as she clenched her fists. I was still green, a fledgling with a power I didn't even understand. My telepathy had barely sparked. I tried to pull her with me, but Bakuto was stronger. He came at her like a shadow, slipped past the animal somehow, and reached her. I barely remember it. Everything happened so fast. There was a flash, and then, darkness. When I woke up, I was alone in an alley. She was gone. The silence that followed was thick, filled with a kind of dread that only deep loss could bring. I watched Emma's expression, her gaze hard as stone, yet hiding the pain she thought she'd long since buried. "I spent weeks looking for her," Emma whispered, her voice raw, betraying how close this wound still was to the surface. "Every night, every lead, I followed it. But no matter where I went, the Hand always stayed 2 steps ahead, leading me in circles, making sure I was lost. Eventually, they started to send messages. They told me Chat was still alive. That they had her, but only if I did what they said. They dangled her life in front of me, taunted me with glimpses of hope, and I was too powerless to fight back." Her jaw tightened, her eyes blazing with anger and grief. That's when I found Shaw. He was ruthless, cunning, a man who promised power, who gave me the tools to keep fighting. I joined him, worked under him, and did things I never thought I'd do. All to gain a foothold in this world. All for the power I needed to go back and rip the Hand apart from the inside out. Shaw knew I had my own reasons for joining him, and he let me use his resources because I was useful to him. And in exchange, I played along. This club, this whole setup, it's a farce. A way to build the power I need to find Chat. I'll tear it all down if it brings me even a step closer to her. She turned to look at me, her gaze intense, full of a fire that hadn't dimmed since that night. "So now you know. My goal isn't to rule over anyone or get wrapped up in this underworld. This whole act, it's just one more layer of armor I wear to get what I need." She stopped, letting her words settle. For a moment, her eyes softened, as if the storm within her had calmed, if only just enough for her to look at me with something other than suspicion. "But now Shaw's dead. His connections, his leverage gone. And without him, my path just got a whole lot harder. Her eyes searched mine, a mix of doubt and a faint glimmer of hope. So why help me? Why offer to give me what Shaw never could? I took a breath, keeping my own voice steady. Because I'm not here to play Shaw's games or take over his world. I'm here to put things back where they belong, starting with myself. I need my original body and answers. And for that, I need someone who knows this world, who can lead me to those controlling it. So, I help you, you help me. That's simple, right? We both get what we want, and maybe we both get what we need. Emma stared at me for a moment, her gaze searching my face, as though she was still trying to decide if I was telling the truth. I could almost see her weighing the decision, considering the possibilities, before finally giving a slight nod. Let's say, I tell you everything you want to know. How are you going to find Chat? I tried to find her for 3 years, and all I got were dead ends and traps. The hand has connections everywhere, and if they have her, they won't be easy to get to. If you're planning to start a war with them, you'd better bring your A game, she said. I know someone who can pinpoint Chat's location. Someone with the power to find people, and the tech to narrow it down, I replied. Emma arched a brow at that. Who? Wanna find out? Come with me, I stood up.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.